All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to our City Council work meeting for Wednesday, September 9th, 2020. This meeting will be conducted electronically at www.herriman.org/agendas and minutes. We are under guidance by the county, are maintaining our social distance, and we are wearing our masks, so everybody in the room that is present is wearing a mask and is maintaining their social distance. So that's why you will see me wearing a mask today during our meeting. We will begin by a review of tonight's agenda. Are there any items that we need to make adjustments to for tonight? Any adjustments for tonight's agenda? Okay. We will move on to item 1.2. Any future agenda items that the council members would like to have added to the agenda?
I have an item I'd like to bring up. A couple sessions ago, we were approached with a request for us to issue a letter as a city in support of a bond for some transportation projects. Some questions were asked about who had requested that and what was the nature of the projects being we were asked to endorse and so forth, and we never really got clear answers on that. Through some channels, I've gotten some research that says that no other mayors or city have been asked to write a letter in support of any bonds. None of the other mayors know anything about any bonds. Talked with people in the state legislature who say there are no current bills open and no bond bills associated with anything like this. I'd really like to know who the hell is asking us for this letter and under what context they're asking it and why they're only asking Herriman for it. So I want all of those answers provided and it on our next agenda.
Staff, any questions on that item? Okay, staff will get into that. Any other items for future agenda?
I have one that I'd like to bring up. Had some communications from some of our residents as well as some of our planning commissioners. And I know we've had this discussion before, but I've actually been involved in an issue recently within the city as it pertains to code enforcement. I think obviously the code enforcement process can be, especially if you have an unwilling member on the other end of that to resolve issues. It can be a lengthy process and it can be very frustrating, I think, for some of the residents that are adjacent to some of the issues that we have. And sometimes compliance can be drawn out quite a bit. So I just would like to have on there another general discussion amongst the council as it relates to code enforcement, and where we've always taken the stance that we want to be, we don't want to be, heavy-handed in that. We want to kind of be complaint-driven on that. We want to go through an education process, which I think is all appropriate. But I think that there are times too when there needs to be an avenue, at least for our code enforcement officers, and some direction, I think, as well from council and staff as to, what the expectations are really for as it pertains to code enforcement and that look and feel of the city. So again, I just want to have another code enforcement discussion so that we can make sure that we're giving our staff the tools that they need to adequately enforce the codes that we have in place.
Okay.
You have a few comments about that, Clint. One, it is heavily on our radar, and I was going to have it in SEMA updates. So since we brought it up, I'll just talk about it. We'll talk about our process and put it on a future work meeting agenda. But it's been interesting in COVID times that we've had a stream of more RV trailers parked on the street because people are actually living in them now to try to separate and quarantine away from the rest of their family members. That's one item. But we've actually had more complaints turned in by residents during this time than we've experienced in the past. And when we went through the budget process, we talked about adding another code enforcement officer on. And me and Alan met last week, and we feel like we came in agreements that we were going to pull that trigger sooner than later. So we're actually getting ready to post for that job right now to get more code enforcement out there on the street. But I think it's good timing to bring it to council and work meeting and talk about what philosophy you want us to go by, because we have our ordinances and we can hammer down, but that's never been our philosophy. But if that's kind of leaning more enforcement versus educate, bring them along, do it by complaint, I want to get that direction from you all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think people are just home too much, so they can look around at their neighbors and see what bugs them. Apparently, that's the blessing of COVID right there.
It
No
is.
wonder we have more.
It's been really,
complaints.
really strange to look at that. And our residents, I've never seen them complain about each other so much. It's kind of funny in a way, but they
Everyone's
have been.
irritated with each other.
They don't like their weeds. They don't like their trees. They don't like their cars in their yards. They are complaining more, which is fine. And we are addressing those as case-by-case basis. But we also recognize we're shorthanded in there. We knew that last budget cycle. But we feel confident in the budget so far that Alan gave us the thumbs up to go ahead and notice for that job. So that'll be an improvement right there. But we'll talk about the processes, okay?
Thank you.
So not only do we have increased domestic violence, but we have increased neighbor-to-neighbor irritation.
All right. Any other items? Okay. We'll move on to item 1.3, council leadership task list review. We can get that up on screen.
This isn't necessarily really on there, but just because it's kind of fitting right on here. You should all know that McQuiston actually has asphalt on it. I just thought everyone would want to know that.
That's good to hear.
That was gonna be-
sidewalk, there's asphalt, it's lovely. There's still a few things to finish up, but it's
Well-
happening.
Well, guess what, Sherry? I have that on my list to give you that update too, so I crossed that one off now too.
Sorry, I was actually gonna take a picture and send it to everyone, or do a video on here, do a ribbon cutting or something. But shout out to all the people that worked hard to get that done, including and especially the residents who were willing to donate land and right of way and things like that to make sure that there's some safe walking and to better beautify our city. So thanks to everyone involved.
Now that's awesome. I'll have to go out there and take a peek, and it's amazing.
Good job.
It happened in record time.
So guess what? We're gonna get complaints about speeding because Blake tells me it's very smooth, which will mean more higher speeds.
Yep, for sure. There's always something to complain about, but it's not dusty and the kids aren't getting run over, so that's good.
Okay, let's see here. It looks like any items that we're looking for additional information on for today? Okay, if there's no questions or concerns with the list before us, we will go ahead and move on to item 2.1 of our agenda, South Hills Master Development Agreement discussion. Blake Thomas.
Okay. While they're getting that PowerPoint put up on the screen, I can just kind of give a brief overview on this. This is not the first time we've discussed this amendment. We've actually discussed it at length to this point, it feels like. But I think we're at a point now where we can come and bring it to the council. And I think this is their plan that they feel really comfortable moving forward with. It's evolved and changed, and they've added properties and taken some out. They've had some negotiations with Staker and some other properties, and I think that's all tied down now. So then I guess the other thing I want to mention before we get going in the presentation is Bruce Baird is actually up in the council chambers right now, and he's available for questions as we go through this. I just have a handful of slides I'm going to go through and give some background information, and then open it up to questions at that point. Let me see if I can change the slide here.
There goes.
All right. So the first thing is, why is there an amendment? And so the actual acquisition of property doesn't spur an amendment. It automatically adds 4.5 units to the acre for property acquired based on the MDA. But there's some other things that have to go along with that. There's the land use plan that they're putting together. And what they've done here at this land use plan, as we get into it, is they've moved some units around that were unused below Mountain View Corridor and put them up top, and then they've added some residential units in some other areas. So we'll get to that. They added some property from Rosecrest that was commercial in nature. So the original MDA did not have any commercial guidelines. So they've brought some commercial guidelines to the Planning Commission. They were adopted, and technical guidelines for the commercial development. And they're really good, is what Bryn tells me. So I believe her. I've read them too, and they address the things that we're typically concerned about, the facades of the buildings and signs and things like that. The other things that have changed, there's some infrastructure alignment. We've discussed South Hills Boulevard in a previous meeting. The plans that I'm showing you tonight don't have the new alignment on them, but we're working through that. And then they've added some pretty significant property above Mountain View Corridor, which is kind of what spurred the realignment of South Hills Boulevard. And then before I go any further, I wanted to have Michael Malloy talk a little bit about the density transfer requirement. This is a provision in the current adopted MDA, and it has a lot of weight on what we're doing here. So I'll turn it over to him for just a moment.
Thank you. And this is also something that we have talked briefly about with the City Council in the past. In the current MDA, there are requirements for how the units are spent. So tonight, the land use plan that we're going to be looking at has various pods. And within each of those pods, the developer is signaling to the city where they would like to spend their density, where they get to spend the units. And that's good. That's one piece of just kind of coordinating the development of this property. The MDA specifies that the density is still limited by the zone. Now, there is a second provision in the MDA that talks about transferring density. It's 4.3.1, density transfer provisions. And if you can imagine, you have two different zones. And let's say each zone holds a cup of water. But in one zone, you actually want to have a cup and a half. Well, the way the MDA works is you've got to reduce a half cup from the other zone in order to add an extra half cup to where you want to spend or overspend your units. The other thing about the MDA is it says that both of those zones have to be the same zone. So you're going to be sending units from an R110 zone to another R110 zone. But in the end, you haven't overspent your density when you combine both of those zones together. But the MDA does allow you to overspend in one area as long as you underspend in another. And that's been one of the key concerns, is making sure that we understand that the zoning density standards still apply, even though the land use plan may say one thing, we still have to follow the underlying zone. And if we agree to spend more units in one particular zone, in a sense, overspend in one area, we have to have another zone that we can draw down on. And I've used the term ascending and receding zone, but if you look in the MDA, that's not the language of the MDA. That's just kind of a simplified kind of version of what we're doing here. So I just want to make sure we're careful about that the zoning, what we're talking about tonight is just the land use plan. The zoning is separate, and the zoning still has a governing role in how the property is developed. Is there any questions about that?
Just out of curiosity, what's the density allowed on an R215? What's the range?
I would need to look for that, Mayor. I apologize. And I can tell that to you. Maybe while Blake is continuing, I can follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Michael. So yeah, that kind of sets the stage for moving on here. So that last map that you saw on the slide was actually the original approved from 2009 land use plan. We've since amended it because RSL came in. And so you can see the 2018 land use plan on the left here, and then you can see the proposed land use plan that they're proposing. And I get into a little more detail here, so you'll be able to see the tables in just a moment. But the key things I just want to point out, just looking at the colors on the map, you can see a couple of red parcels on the upper left portion. Those are pods 35 and 39. Those are the parcels that were acquired from Rosecrest. They're the commercial parcels. You can also see there's some darker colored shading inside those red parcels. That's proposed housing, attached housing in those parcels. Then you can also see the green area, which is the RSL fields, and they've added that property to their MDA. And the other part that is really prevalent is down on the southeast corner, I guess, of the property. They've added a number of acres down there for the area up above Mountain View Corridor. So as I get breaking this down in a minute, I've kind of broken it into lower, which is below Mountain View Corridor, and upper, which is above Mountain View Corridor. And then I did kind of a quick comparison of open space from what it is and what they're proposing, just to kind of give us some ideas there. Let's see, the next one kind of zooms in on the proposed map. So like I said, there's 218 residential units inside the commercial area that they're proposing to add. That is equal to the 4.5 units per acre adding on. And that does include, if you remember, there were some sliver parcels along Mountain View Corridor that were surplused and given back. It takes the acreage of those sliver parcels and includes it to get to the 218. It's not very much property, but it's enough to add a few units on there. There's also the addition of 4.5 units per acre for the RSL property that was provided to RSL from Herriman City. That equals 140 residential units. And then the other area is adding units to generally pods 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. This is the area that they've added that's on top or above Mountain View Corridor. This is a hard area to compare to the original plan because the pods kind of overlap a little bit. They share some of the original plan. And so I know Bryn has asked for a little bit more clarity on an exhibit. We haven't received that exact exhibit yet, but we will in the future. So as we move forward, you'll be able to see that. So as we break down the tables here, that might be kind of hard to see, but that's the breakdown of the 218 units that they're proposing up in pods 35 and 39 in that table that just came up. And if your screen is as small as mine, you can't see it.
Hey, Blake. Clarifying question then. So, and maybe you're getting to this now. So the next bullet point down is addition of 4.5 units per acre for the RSL pod. You said that Herriman had given to them. Were you referring to units or the land?
Sorry, the land was given to RSL as part of the whole deal to make the RSL stadium and package happen.
Okay, so next question then would be, if that was a donation of Herriman property to make that possible, great amenity to the community, why would there be units now also tied to that to give them for donated land?
It's a great question. I don't know the entire answer to that. Maybe we'll have Mr. Baird come up after if you'd like. As we've discussed this with the developer, he has just informed me every time that it's acreage that's getting added to the master development agreement, and he has a provision in there that says there's 4.5 units to the acre. So I think that'd be a great question to ask his representative that's here tonight.
This is Jared. I'd actually like to ask that question to our attorney. Are we required to allow them to do that? Because I don't think any of us are in favor of it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have the specific answer to that. I can look that up right now in the MDA. And again, maybe while Blake's continuing or after Mr. Baird's spoken, but I will look that up right now.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Chase.
I think I understand the language in there that allows that for acreage added. However, I'll be honest, I feel like that's taking advantage and gaming the system a little bit. That is because that we've added that, that's donated land by the city in order to make that happen. They shouldn't get the benefit of the density also that comes with that. So I'm really looking for some clarification on that.
Chase, as you're looking through that, one additional question comes up about adding additional land to the MDA. Is there any requirement that that needs to happen as well? Do they have a right to just say, we're going to add this, or is that something that we have the right to just potentially say no to?
Okay. Well, I guess we'll keep moving on and then we can get those answers here in a moment. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Okay. So you can see the little table that popped up there that shows the RSL property, and they're proposing the 31.15 times 4.5 is 140. Everything else that you're seeing on that table is either under construction or built out on that lower piece.
So the ask is to get credit for the RSL pod and dump it in another bucket, right? Dump it in another pod.
Yes, that's correct.
But they still have to. They couldn't necessarily dump all 140 units in there because the underlying zoning might not allow that much density. Correct?
That is correct. That's why we let out with that discussion on the density transfer provision.
Okay.
So that very astute observation. I like it. And then the last table here is just showing the units that they're adding above Mountain View Corridor for those pods. And you can see some of them are getting up above the 4.5 units per acre, but that's because of the density transfer and how that's interpreted.
What is the current zoning and master plan for the area that covers those pods right now?
That was my question about the that brings me back to that R215 as I'm looking at the general plan on my computer. What was that zoning that's allowed on that? Because that's what we have currently.
So the apologize, Mayor. The R215 allows up to it's 5.8 units per acre is the R215.
What's the range on that?
There's no range. It's just a maximum.
Okay.
5.8. R210, just for comparison, is 8 units per acre. So it's a smaller lot. That's why there's more units per acre in an R210. And then the RM is 20 units per acre. So it's a multifamily zone, obviously, residential multifamily.
Do you have the MU in front of you by chance?
So the mixed use is 20. But that's only if you do true mixed use. You have to do a vertical mixed use in order to have that density. If you're doing just straight residential, it's 10 units per acre.
Thank you.
And Mayor, you'd asked about the existing zoning. It's kind of a hodgepodge. There's some A1, there's some R115, R215, some MU2. So it'll take us a little while to lay things out and see how many acres of each lay in each one of those.
From what I'm looking at on the map, it looks like the majority of it for this particular area is either R215 or R115 or MU. So from a general plan standpoint, what I'm seeing is this is where we intended to put some density. So it's, the question is, to us, for me, is not about, does density go here or not? The question is, how many units are they actually allowed? And as we look through the development agreement, what are we required to do? That Real property is a big question to me as well. If we donated it, why are they getting credit for units there if we donated the land that was our land? So, but yeah, that helps me kind of understand what we originally planned there. And so I'm not as, concerned. It's about hashing out numbers for me.
Mhm. Okay. And so this next table that you're seeing is just a straight comparison from the approved land use plan to the proposed land use plan. And it's showing acres, units, and like I said, I broke it between the lower, the upper, and the open space. Remembering that the lower is all entitled and built out except for pods 35 and 39. So they're adding 4.5 units to the acre for pods 35 and 39. And you can see that the difference is 15 more units. And so those units are going to move to up above the hill. And then the big change is the upper area. They did add a significant amount of acres up there, 72 acres about. And that's just developable acreage. There's also open space acreage they're adding up above. So like I said, it was hard to compare acres, apples to apples, acres to acres or apples to apples. But you can just see the breakdown there, the difference. The upper area is 856 more units than what they'd originally planned. So they've got a lot of space up there. There's some density down lower. There's a lot less dense development up higher as we get in and review it. And then just keep in mind the pods 35 and 39 have the commercial component that they're bringing in that wasn't there before. So the last slide, and then I broke it into lower and upper, just kind of show where those areas lie, be clear. And then the last slide is just some recommendations. Bryn presented this to the Planning Commission last week and went over some of these things. These are some items that I've went through the existing development agreement, identified as some things that we've had concerns with or issues with in the past. I've actually spoken about each one of these items with the developer and kind of got his temperature on them. And he was good with all these changes. The one he was a little worried about was the street lighting. He needed to do a little more homework on it before he felt comfortable with it. But all these other things are just things to just make it better. As we've implemented the master development agreement and worked through some of the items, these are some things that we've noticed have caused us issues in the past. And this will just make the development better, make things just work better up there, make it all around a better project at the end of the day. So these are just items that we'll go through and make text changes in the MDA or update the master plans or whatever, which we need to do anyway with water tanks and water lines and roads. So with that, I guess I'm ready for questions if you have any, or if you'd like to ask the representative there, he's also available for questions as well.
Council members, what questions do you have?
Well, I guess I really want to have a clear understanding of exactly what is allowed. It seems like we've seen this a lot of times, and I'm still confused about what they can or what they can't have. Here's the zone, and here's the amount of density that's allowed, and here's what they can have. Those kind of answers to those types of questions, that would be very clear to me to say, there because of the MDA, they could have 20 units per acre in this area, but because of the zoning, they can only have 8, things like that. So I can be very clear on which one is ruling. Is the zoning ruling or is the MDA ruling in that? And obviously zoning trumps, so you understand very clearly what can be allowed in each pod or what could not be allowed in each pod. That would be very helpful. I do like these recommended changes to the MDA. Part of my huge frustration on any of our MDAs is that we lock these in to very, very long term. This is very old. And we update our ordinances to make things more efficient in our city, but they don't have to comply with that, which I understand. They're locked into a legal agreement, and I very much appreciate that. But it doesn't lock them into any of the upgraded safety things if we do them as a city. It does if the state mandates it. But so anything else that you can, just fine tooth comb this MDA and make sure that we're not missing anything else like that. That I don't want to strong arm the developer. We want to be partners with them on this, but if they would, be willing to comply with things. And the other thing I'll plug in there is the water standards. Are they going to comply with our new, our new conservation standards and things like that? Let's take a look at those kind of things, because if we're going to open it up to amendments, we might as well amend the things all that we want to amend and see what they will comply with.
Yeah, and I would second what Sherry's question is there, because these new pods on the south end, especially where there's going to be potentially a lot of new homes and a lot of density, this is essentially new plans for new construction. And I would not like to necessarily include that under 10-year-old vetting ordinances. If we're going to build new property, we'd like it to be in compliance with what our new standards are and our new expectations are, so that as we continue to build and modify things, we're keeping up with the appropriate standards for our city. I wouldn't want to add another, 900 or 1,000 units and not have them be in compliance with the rest of the new construction in the city. So I'd like to get some understanding about that as well.
Clint, do you have questions?
No, I agree with the points made by both Sherry and Steve, especially to the updated ordinances that we have. I think that again, as you have these very long-term MDAs, there has to be an expectation that things are going to change and improve over time, and that expectation should be there as well. I do see, one of the bullet points in here does, the park strip landscaping does update to conform with the Jordan Valley standard. So obviously, that's one. Yeah, that's one of those things that are in there, which I think is appropriate. Really, my questions are going to go back to the ones that were asked to Chase previously, and some clarification on those.
Thank you. Jared, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, just a couple quick ones, mostly what's been said, but just in case, I'll review them. But I agree with the recommended changes listed there, and the sentiment from the others regarding updating city ordinances. I mean, I don't see any of those things being, too cumbersome to comply with. It's more paperwork than anything. I mean, if it is overly, monetarily cumbersome, then show us. But that, I think that should be kind of expected. If we do updates, let's do updates that make sense. So I think those should be included. Going back through the history of this, just over the last 12 months that I can kind of see in my notes here, this was first brought to us simply because of the Rosecrest acquisition and shifting those units, right? And the issue at the time was that Rosecrest did not want to relinquish the units, yet Wasatch wanted to add them, and we had that issue. Well, now we've come to agreement where Rosecrest is willing to do that. Great, and then during that time, it seems that there's the two others that have come up that for some reason now at this point, years and years later, they want to add units for property that the city donated specifically for the soccer facility. That doesn't seem right. The MDA itself might have general language about adding units for acquired property. I don't know that this necessarily would fit the definition of acquired if it was given, right? So that's what we're looking for clarification from Chase. And I think that's kind of an overreach in this regard. I mean, to me, it falls in the category of, I guess it doesn't hurt to ask, but it's kind of in bad form to me. And then the last thing, the repositioning of the roadway, we had several separate presentations on that, which I thought we had kind of worked through. I don't really have an issue with that one. So at least for me, the updates to the overall MDA, including ordinances, and then this issue of the donated property from the city for this specific purpose, I think is really all that we need on this.
Before, it looks like Chase might be ready to add some insight. Before he does that, I would just like to maybe give ask a request from you, Chase. I'm looking at this and you're looking at this, in kind of a quick manner, trying to get us an answer as we're discussing this. Um, Regardless of what is said, what you tell us right now, I would like to have a more full briefing on these, your opinion on these legal items in writing before we actually make any sort of decision on this. I would just like to give you an opportunity to really dive deep into these before we, take your word as what we're going with. I know you're a fantastic attorney, but I don't want to push you into an answer when we're not ready for it. So I would still like your opinion and your comments. I would like to caution us as a council that this is a quick overlook, and that possibly could change once he looks at it a little deeper. So Chase, if you wouldn't mind giving maybe some input on some of the questions we asked, if you can.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think this will take a little bit more diving into and a more thorough analysis. There is some general language about the transfer of units, and to be honest, I can see where that donation, the units associated with the donation from the city would come into play. But it will take some more time. I'll work with Blake. I'll work with Mr. Baird to really hammer down on that specific language within the MDA and be able to report back to council on that.
How long do you think that will take? Would you be able to have it for our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So it looks to me as if the council has given some direction on some information they need. Is there any other direction or comments or questions or any additional information that the council members would like at this time? Okay, seeing that there's no further requests, we'll direct staff to have this on our next agenda with some additional information so that we can further discuss this item. Before I move on, I do want to just state to the developer, thank you for bringing this to us and working with us. I think that we're all in the idea that we want to work together as a partnership, not as a and figure out a solution that works for everyone. We just want to make sure that we get our answers from our attorney first. I'm just, because we've been talking about you.
I was just going to say thank you. I was just going to agree with you, Mr.
Okay, awesome. The representative for the applicant was just expressing his appreciation for working together. So with that, we will go ahead and move on to our next item. Thank you, guys. We'll move on to item 2.2, discussion relating to high-speed internet service in Herriman. Chase.
Thank you, council. So I know for a long time we've been talking, at least as long as I've been around, all 4 months of that. This has come up actually quite a bit, and I know it's an important thing for the city to try to figure out how to provide our residents and businesses with high-speed internet options. And when we talk about high-speed internet, really what we're looking at is like 1 gig speeds, and that does not come from a cable network. That really has to come through a fiber utility. And that's really what we're here to talk about today, is how do we make that happen? How do we get fiber into Herriman and allow all of our residents and all of our businesses to have fiber to the home? There are a couple of benefits of that. One, obviously, is an immediate benefit is we're going to have increased speeds to residents and businesses. And in this time particularly, that's important as people are at home doing school, home working, right? And it's likely that these types of changes that we've gone through in response to COVID are going to be more permanent for a lot of people. So this is definitely something that's on people's minds as they adjust to new work schedules, new school schedules and things. It's also important because technology in terms of wireless services, and I know we've talked about small cell wireless facilities and the future there, that's coming as well. And technology really is going to be connected to having a fiber utility within the city. So while that's a few years out, getting the infrastructure in now or as soon as possible is also very crucial. What we are looking at here is just a map of Herriman City showing the existing fiber running through the city, as well as potential conduit where fiber could be run. The blue lines are third-party fiber that are usually connected to newer developments. We see some fiber running down Mountain View Corridor that services Soleil Lofts, RSL. The purple lines are ATMS lines, which are conduit that has been installed again, to potentially run, the city could potentially run fiber through those, but as you see, it doesn't really get out to the bulk of our residents and businesses in the central and kind of southwest quadrants of the city. Currently, we do only have 2 real internet service providers. These are cable-based services, so speeds are not going to be up to those high speed levels that we talked about earlier. And it's usually one of those 2 options. And as we all know, that's not always a great thing for consumers, right? To just have those 2 options. So it would be great for Herriman to be able to get some additional providers in, ISPs, internet service providers that could provide additional customer service, prices, benefits to the residents of Herriman. And going back to this, one of the concerns here as well is these are great services and they provide a lot of benefit to people, but they don't joint venture with cities. So there's really no benefit for them to go out to those areas of Herriman that do not have higher speed internet options. Comcast and CenturyLink do have fiber networks that run out in certain areas, but again, those are usually tied to individual developments, and there's no incentive for these internet service providers to branch out beyond that newer development. Again, just another map here of where we do currently have some higher speed internet service available. As you'll see, it's kind of spotty. We're really not able to branch out a lot from that with the current infrastructure that we have. One option that we've looked into, and I have to give a lot of credit to staff on this, they've met with Utopia and looked at some of the options here in getting fiber to every home in Herriman, would be to partner with Utopia to enter into a joint venture. What this would look like really is it would take Utopia about 2 to 3 years to really build out the infrastructure to get fiber to every home and business within Herriman City. They would front the cost of that. Again, that would be about 30 million. That is a medium estimate. It could be less, it could be more. We might add 10 million on each side of that either way. So again, these are just rough estimates based upon our conversation with Utopia, but they would front the cost of that. However, we would be the backstop on that loan. We would have to pay for that if 35% of the residents or fewer did not sign up for the service, or if 35%, the reverse of that, however, is if 35% of the residents did sign up for Utopia service, we would not be on the hook at all for any of this bill. Under this,
Chase, what would be the approximate monthly cost for a resident to sign up for Utopia Fiber?
That's a great question. So I'll get to that here. I think it's about $40 for Utopia, and then they would pay a fee to a number of internet service providers that the customer could choose from. So there would be 10 or 15 internet service providers that a resident could choose from with different fees, different facilities, or different equipment that they could rent from that internet service provider. Again, offering more choices to the resident. So it's comparable to what Comcast and Xfinity are currently charging. So again, the real benefit of this is they would come in, they would do all of the construction, they would own all of the infrastructure, and they would manage it all. And the city would really just be the one backing the loan for that infrastructure. That would again be paid for out of sales tax, franchise fees, and other funds that we would collect throughout the city. There is again a potential downfall here of if we get 0 residents to sign up for Utopia and they come in and install this infrastructure, the city would be on the hook for about $165,000 a month for the payment on that. And that's assuming that it costs $30 million to install all of that infrastructure.
Just a quick question there on that, Chase. So is that an all or nothing? So if we meet that 35%, we don't pay anything? Or is it, if we hit 30%, we only pay a portion of that, or if we only hit 30, we still are on the hook for the whole thing? Like what's the breakdown there?
That's correct, Mayor. We are on the hook for whatever obligation is not satisfied by the fees that they would collect. So if only 30% of our residents sign up, we would be responsible for the remaining amount to cover their loan for that month.
So we're
Great.
we're not on the hook for the full 40 million or 30, well, I'm going to say 40 million because I want to go, conservative. Let's say it's 40 million. If we get 35% or 30% of our residents signed up, we're not on the hook for the full 40, we're on the hook for 5.
We would be on the hook for the 5% for the dollar value of what that 5%
But
represents.
I mean, that's kind of the idea, is we're not going to be on the hook for the full 40. We'd only be on for okay, thank you.
Right. One of the things to remember, however, under that structure, Mayor, is that we're not collecting any fees under this. Any revenue that's generated under this relationship with Utopia would be maintained by Utopia. There may be an opportunity for us to negotiate some franchise fee where they use our conduit, or we enter into some other agreement about the collection of fees and a payment of some of that fee to Herriman. But that again would be part of the negotiation phase with them. And then Steve, to answer your question, again, one of the benefits of going here is Utopia only installs the fiber, the groundwork fiber, and then any number of internet service providers can come in and offer internet service using that fiber. So customers and residents within Herriman City have an opportunity to go in and enter into a contract with any one of these internet service providers. You're looking at about, based upon the feedback that we've received from Utopia, about $80 a month for 1 gig speeds. Most Comcast users and CenturyLink users are paying close to that for speeds less than that. So this would be a potentially greater value for your dollar here. One of the other options that we've looked at is having Herriman own and provide the utility, so the groundwork fiber. And essentially what that would be is Herriman would come in as Utopia, we would come in as a utility provider, and we would contract to install that fiber, we would own it, and we would be the ones that would manage that fiber network. Obviously, there are some legal issues with that. We would be owning a utility, we'd have to create an enterprise fund, we'd collect the fee, we would manage all of that. There would be some additional full-time employees that you would need to bring on board to obviously oversee all of that utility. But much like the Utopia model or the private partnership model, we would have the opportunity to bring in any number of internet service providers to give residents and businesses in Herriman additional options to choose in selecting their internet service provider. And it would also, again, make that fiber utility available as small cell towers are installed throughout the city, and as 5G and 6G and additional networks are installed throughout the city. Let me back up to this. Obviously some of the concern here is that the city would have to pay for this. There are a number of ways you could do that. You could enter into an interlocal agreement. You could create a district, or you could create a special assessment area. There are a lot of ways to fund this model. And that's something that we'll have to look at in more detail as we look at the benefits versus the cost and the risks of managing it yourself. Obviously, one of the benefits is that the city would maintain all of the revenue. So if, again, the city were to bond for $40 million and we were to get 35%, just using the numbers that we did from our last example, we were to use those percentages, we would be able to make the payment on the bond. Any additional revenue that came in from that would be able to be contributed back into the system and pay down the bond earlier, and increase, again, the infrastructure and the technology that would be needed to maintain the levels of service that are demanded by the residents.
It's the biggest concern I have about that option is competing against the private market. I just fundamentally don't think government should set up organizations to compete against private markets using taxpayers' funds, because that's what it would be. It would be using taxes to compete against the private market. That would be my biggest concern about Herriman City doing it.
Absolutely, and that's a legitimate concern, Sherry. I do think too, in counterweighting that, there is a demand for this type of utility, and I think we can all agree that there is a need for it in Herriman as well. And it is, in theory at least, we would need to look at the numbers in more detail still, but in theory it would be the government at least providing that service that the private market is not willing to do for a reasonable price. Obviously, if we can find a reasonable price and that makes sense, I think that's a great option. And that's what kind of this discussion is for, is to consider what our options are and look at what our options are and find out what is the best for Herriman, what's the best for the city in terms of financing this type of infrastructure and getting it really into every home within Herriman. So really
I'm going to
kind of
make a comment too, Sherry, if I might, there real quick about your comment, is that the truth is that private enterprises aren't providing this service to the city. They're not providing it to our residents. They have an opportunity and they're just not doing it. In fact, the only way we're going to get a private company to do it is if we backstop their cost of building it. It's still putting taxpayer money. Essentially, they're going to use taxpayer money to guarantee their cost of construction, and then have a utility they can make profit on for the rest of the time. Either way, we're still using taxpayer money to try and provide a service for the taxpayers of Herriman. I don't know that we're necessarily competing with anybody because there's nobody to compete with right now. So
Sure.
I'm not necessarily saying it's the right decision or the wrong decision, but to say that we're competing with private enterprise, I don't know is accurate based on what's being provided to the residents right now.
Sure. And I guess just naivety on my part. I don't know exactly who does what, who provides stuff and who doesn't. Like, I know that you showed us some pictures of it is being provided in some places in Herriman, this fiber, correct? So how is it being provided there, and why can't it be spread more broad throughout the city, those types of things? So are you saying that the businesses are just not interested in making that money because it's not cost effective? And if it's not a cost effective for a private business, what would make it cost effective for a city to do it? You know what I mean? So just I have lots of questions is all I'm saying.
And really, those are all great questions, and they're all things that we need to consider as we look at what the best options are. Because you're right, there are people, and when I say people, I mean developers, whether that be residential or commercial, that have contracted with these companies to say, hey, we will backstop whatever costs you have to get that service here. And it's usually tied to some newer development, and developers have been able to provide an incentive that has made it worth those companies coming out. So that's something we can do. And it may be that we're able to provide an incentive without backstopping, a private company's loan like Utopia, or us bonding for that amount. So those are all things, of course, here that we need to look at as we go forward. And really that's kind of what another element of this conversation is finding out what we need to find out. We need to find out what we don't know and what we need to know moving forward. So this slide really just looks at where we're at now. The status quo, obviously the benefit here is there's no financial risk to the city. We're not providing any benefit to our residents or businesses by giving them a high-speed internet option, but also we're not at risk. We're not encumbering taxpayer money, but with bonds or backstopping a loan for a Utopia-like company to come in and provide that infrastructure. We also don't have that infrastructure available when a newer technology comes in and as the demand increases for this type of utility to be provided to our residents and businesses. If we were to join Utopia, like we talked about, it would be about 2 to 3 years before we were able to get fiber to every home and business within Herriman City. Under that option, we would be the ones that would backstop and be responsible for the loan payment on the costs of installing that infrastructure throughout the city. We've pegged that, again, kind of moderately at about $30 million, but it could be more, it could be a little bit less depending on the need throughout the city. And again,
the hard part about some of that too is 2 to 3 years from now, especially with what's going on in our country and the like you said, some of the shift in the dynamics of people working from home and things like that, and the demand increases, then innovation increases and people start creating better ideas, better ways of receiving internet at your home. So in 3 years from now, it's quite possible that the technology is very outdated and something way better is out there and we're still on the hook for $30 million. So
it's true.
Anyway, the crystal ball would be nice, huh?
And when you find it, Sherry, let me know. So, and then finally, what are one of our other options? And these aren't all of our options. These are the most obvious options that we've looked at now. There are other private public partnerships that we could enter into with additional companies. We haven't spoken with those about what those details are. So that's why we haven't included even some of the generic details in this presentation for you here tonight. But those are all things that we'll look into as well. The final option that I did talk about tonight was Herriman City owning that utility, installing that utility, bonding, or finding a way to finance that, the installation of that utility, and then managing and working with residents to get internet service providers to get that service to their home. The benefits obviously are we're the ones that retain all the revenue, if there is any. Again, if there aren't enough customers that sign up for that, then we're not generating enough revenue. Ideally, though, that would be something that we would achieve 35, 40, even closer to 50% sign up service rates with residents and businesses throughout the city. So at this time, really what we're looking at is, and asking maybe for some feedback on, is contracting with a consultant to conduct a feasibility study into some of these options and finding maybe other options that could get high-speed internet out to residents and businesses within Herriman. Obviously, some of the things that they would have to look at is, what are the costs to actually install the infrastructure to get high-speed internet to residents and businesses within the city? What are some of the, administrative costs, some of the legal costs that are going to go into that, not only upfront, but ongoing as it's maintained and serviced throughout the city? What type of support would we get from the community? There may be a small majority, or a small minority, or a large majority of people that want it. We just don't know that really at this time. So that 35% number that we talked about earlier, we're not sure if that's feasible or if that's extremely low for what type of sign up we would actually get from residents and businesses. So those are all types of things that a feasibility study would look at. And I think that's really what's needed in order to answer some of these questions that we've all brought up here tonight. So I'll be happy to answer any other questions I can or get feedback from the council on this.
Price tag on feasibility study.
Yeah, I think conservatively $75,000 to $100,000 for a feasibility study of this nature. There would be a lot of work that would go into looking at, again, the demand and the potential sign up and participation from residents and businesses. There would be a lot of legwork that would go into that. Also, a lot of looking at what future, predicting, crystal ball, like you mentioned, Sherry, predicting what future infrastructure would be needed, what future additions, what additional costs might be required in order to maintain a certain level of service under a structure like this. So to answer your question, probably $100,000.
And how crazy of an idea is it just to do even a survey of our public to say who would be interested in this? Get a good feel for who would want to participate. Could we do something like that to get some public feedback, some input from our residents?
I think we could.
What does that cost?
Yeah, that might be, I don't have an exact cost for that, but I think it's probably a stepwise process, right? A consultant would be able to provide that service for us at a much lower cost and maybe exclude some of those other factors that we would want to look at in determining. But maybe you're right. Maybe looking at that and paying, $10,000 or $20,000 would be more reasonable to get a feel of if there's even interest in the residents and community in having this service made available. So I don't have the answer for you on that, but I can definitely look into that and get back to you.
Chase, I have a comment. We talked about this earlier. We actually had someone come in today to talk about fiber. And what really hit me strongly is because there is such a need for our community because it's so fragmented. The companies that provide internet service right now today with fiber are cherry picking the hot areas and easy areas to get to. That's why they're hitting those areas. That's why it becomes more costly to do all the city. So what we learned really, I'd like to suggest to council, we take a couple of you and maybe a planning commissioner, and with Chase and Gordon and myself and Blake, form a task force, and we work with these outside people and come up with some solutions so we don't have to keep on bring every detail back to council, because council will be involved and guiding the process and come to a conclusion what's best interest of Herriman. The reason, and what Stephen Shields said very spot on, he said, the reason they're cherry picking, they don't want to spend money in the hard areas to bring fiber to areas, Old Town and where Clint lives, where you live, Sherry, no offense, but there's areas they don't want to spend all the money to get there. And it costs a lot of money to get there, and Chase is being kind. I think it's it'll be $30 to $40 million. And so I'd like to hear a couple of names if you like the idea. If you don't like the idea, it's another meeting we'll have, but I think we need to put some really strong effort towards this, because this is the answer to our economic development and our people working from home. And that's why we got to get on it as fast and hard as possible, come up with a solution.
I like that idea, Brett, and I nominate Steve.
Steve
I
always
would,
gets
I would be
nominated.
glad to. I think I'm on the task list thing. It was my issue, I think. So I'll be glad to follow it up with being on a committee if you want to form one.
Yeah, and Sherry, I'd be happy to be on with you too. I'm not, anybody else feel strongly about it, I won't stand in their way, but I've had a number of residents come up to me and ask why we can't do this, how big of an obstacle it is to them to successfully working at home. I really think this is a huge need for our community, and I'd love to be involved in it too.
Couple of quick comments here. Obviously, I support moving forward on, some type of feasibility task force, whatever that looks like moving forward. This is a need that our community has. The longer we wait, the further behind we fall in allowing these opportunities to move forward. I was actually surprised, not that I didn't know the need existed and hear from residents about this need, but as we went through the economic development strategic planning process, and I was surprised at how much attention was focused on this one particular item. And again, if you remember the presentation that was given to us from Bob Springmeyer, this issue was mentioned in there as well, about the need to do this. There is a lot of positive effects that having this type of fiber network throughout our city can bring, obviously on the economic development side for all of our businesses. But really, as we look at the times that we face right now, and the potential really of any day of us all having to bring our kids back home. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But for schooling and the online demands that come there, it became a real struggle the last part of the last school year to facilitate that. And again, a lot of it just comes down to the fact that we don't have the proper infrastructure in place to do that. So I fully support moving forward. I think we're all interested in it. Always willing to serve, but I don't think it matters necessarily which members of the council do serve on this, other than that we make this a priority and we start this process moving forward.
And as of 2 weeks ago, I would say we need to make sure it goes to Clint's house first. So
I concur, and I did have to go. I had to go out and make changes to the current service that I have, which again are limited. But I had to go out and make changes because of the demands that we're currently facing. So I think it just highlights that issue. And personally, it highlighted it for me. And again, with very, very limited options of what I can do, because there's some providers that literally go to my neighbor's house, but they won't extend to me. And so again, it just reduces that down. And certainly I'm not the only one that falls within that. Obviously, being in one of the older neighborhoods or areas developed in the city, probably one of the oldest. When Herriman first started to venture down the development track, again, there's certainly more cost because that wasn't something that was even thought of, nearly 22 years ago when we started the building process for our home.
We use Rise Broadband, by the way, Chase. So no, it's in our city too.
That's great.
Chase, I've got a question for you on your presentation. You several times mentioned 5G, and on your presentation, it looks like it says 5 gigabytes. Are you referring to 5G wireless technology, or are you referring to 5 gigabytes of speed?
I apologize if that's the way it came off. It was just 5G. So in one of our recent meetings, we talked about small cell wireless facilities. They would plug into this type of infrastructure. They would tap into fiber and be able to provide 5G wireless in kind of concentrated hotspots throughout the city. So,
And that's what I thought. I just wanted to be clear on that. Just in a couple of points I want to add here. One, I do think that high-speed internet should be considered a utility. And so for me, as I'm looking at this, while normally, I'm not a huge fan of city government getting into a business per se, I look at this as electricity or as water. This is a utility that our residents generally need to be able to provide to, so that they need to have access to live the expected life that they have in our city. So for me, looking at this is part of that. I do have, for me, I don't expect this to be a quick thing. I don't think this is something that we're going to do in 3 months. Like, this is going to be something that takes a long time before we get to a resolution. I'm not even sure that this entire council will still be here when we finally get to that point. So for me, as we start looking at this, I look at it as an opportunity to start setting the city up for success, regardless if we're here or not, 2 or 3 years from now. So I am in favor of starting this process. It's a big price tag for feasibility studies, so I'm not sure how I feel about jumping on that, right away. But I am open to the idea and to moving forward. The last thing that, as we start to look at this, I just want to make very clear as far as I stand. If the city is going to back this, and this is maybe directed to Chase and to whoever's sitting on this task force, if the city is going to back this or to stopgap these loans or this development cost, I'm very strongly opinionated that if we're going to pay anything, we should get some long-term revenue. So if we're backstopping this and we're the ones taking the risk, we should absolutely be getting some of the revenue that comes from this. And that, I know, is going to be part of a negotiation, but to me, that's probably a deal breaker. If we're not getting some sort of revenue and we are backstopping this, I'm not sure I'd be comfortable moving forward, because if we're taking the risk, our residents should absolutely get the reward as well. Now, if we're not taking any risk, that's a whole different story. But if we're taking the risk, the reward should come back to our residents for that as well. So as we're starting that process, I just want to make sure that I'm very clear about that now, that, for me, if we're taking risk, there should absolutely be some reward in it for us. Even if we don't even pay anything because we hit a 35%, we took the risk, we need some reward. So for my opinion, I think we should start looking at it. I'm more towards the opinion of this should not be city-owned utilities. If we can make this work without the city owning it, and letting that cost be for upgrading and for dealing with technology improving over the years and having to upgrade those systems for residents to have it. If that's not our responsibility, I think that's a good thing. But there's a lot that goes into it, and I think I'm totally on board with having something put together so we can start looking into it. As we look at that, is there any other questions or concerns that we want to discuss right now as members of the council?
Yeah, this is Jared. Sorry, I've been trying
Go for
to get a word in here for a little bit. I think it's been a good introductory discussion, right? This is our first real conversation about this. And these, as Chase mentioned, these certainly are not all the options. This is just kind of the initial, this is what we've looked at so far. I know you guys love my analogies, but I look at this as more of a utility in that, I don't think it's as high a priority as public safety, water, et cetera, but it's definitely rising up. Its priority is going to rise over time, and the longer we wait, the worse some of the older areas will get. But I do see it as a utility. My analogy is that of a road, right? The city puts in the road, and then the residents choose what mode of transportation they want to use on it. A bike, four-wheeler, Uber, Lyft, a cab, UTA, their own car, etc. This would be kind of the same thing. We're putting the road in, and then they'd have to choose their own service provider, right? That's kind of the issue, is that the road isn't there, and the older areas that don't have it are not going to have it unless we do something. As Brett stated, it's simply not in a company's best interest to go into an old area and rip old infrastructure out to put this one piece of new infrastructure in, when they can just focus on the new areas and do it at the same time that all the others are being done at a fraction of the cost. That's really kind of the issue. So I'm open to any options that are out there. What I would be interested in really seeing is, what are some of the other kind of hybrid options? Is there something we can do to require fiber conduit to be included in new infrastructure, in new projects? And it's really just the old ones that the city has to worry about, if that makes sense, right? I don't see this as being kind of an all one or the other. The problem that I do have, to Sherry's point with the Utopia thing, is that to me it's almost like a lottery, right? The cities, if we go that route, we're picking one winner. The city's backstopping, basically bankrolling their one company's ability to put the road in, and then they get to own it and charge our residents to use it, right? So, I mean, there has to be a way to include other companies out there who will give us better terms, to David's point, right? That it can't just be sometimes it's easiest just to go with the first thing that comes up. The feasibility study, I have a hard time with, because just in 5 years of this now, these feasibility studies to me just turn into glorified surveys. I mean, we're paying $100,000 basically for them to do some surveys and use information that we have access to. So I like Brett's idea of doing more of a task force, answering all of the questions that we have, and then we could go out from there. I feel like we'll waste a lot of time and a lot of money doing a feasibility study that's going to come back and give us basically the overview that we've gotten. And then we'll still have the same questions going from there. So that's what I've got.
If I could just add one more thing too. I don't know that I was absolutely clear on this. You know, if there are a lot of unanswered questions. I think one of the answers that we do have is that if the city were to bond for a project like this, that would use up all of our bonding capacity. And while we understand and we all agree that this is a utility that we would love to provide to our residents, that would eat up all of our capacity to bond for other projects that are necessary and important for the city. You know, it would take things like sales of franchise tax revenues just to pay off that band, and it would take all of it. So all of the financial minutia that we don't have the answers to are some things that might be answered by a feasibility study, or as Jared mentioned, maybe something that we can just find the answers to ourselves and take some time to do that.
So I think, council, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like we've given some instruction to start working together with some sort of task force that we'll put together with staff and the council members identified, and start moving forward and looking to see if this is a feasible option in the future. And before any funds are really spent, it'll obviously come back to council. So any objection to what to that? Okay, staff, do you have any questions? Okay, great, fantastic. We will then move on to item 2.3, city manager updates. Brett.
Mayor and Council, will hopefully make this quick. We actually eliminated a few items already, so appreciate your help on that, starting with the meeting. But we've been following up on a lot of the task leadership lists. I know that some things are coming up that we can solve, but before I go into that, I want to have Justin just take a brief moment, or Monty, and talk about our mutual aid we've been doing with this windstorm the last few days. So make it quick. Justin?
Okay, yeah.
Monty?
This is Monty. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So just give you a quick update. Yesterday evening, we received a request from Salt Lake County to help with some resources to help out Salt Lake City with damage and debris cleanup caused by the windstorm. Yesterday afternoon, we sent up a crew of 4 with 2 dump trucks and 2 chainsaws. They worked till approximately about 8:30 p.m. last night. Again, this morning, we sent up another crew of 5. At this point in time, we sent up 3 chainsaws and 2 laborers. We'll kind of keep an eye on it and see if we get additional requests throughout the week. We also received a request from Salt Lake County for help with the power outages. So we contacted the traffic signal division and we sent up 3 generators to help them power up some of the traffic signals that they had lost power through the valley. And then also we've received some calls from our residents asking for help with what they can do with trees and green waste from the storm. And so we've set up a location at Butterfield Park, kind of like we do with the spring or fall cleanup, that we're accepting tree limbs and different types of debris and that's damaged from the windstorm. That'll be in the west parking lot and it'll run about the same hours as the park. Do we have any, that's about all I have as far as the update. If you have any questions or anything, I'd be happy to answer them.
I just appreciate that call came through and our staff and team got right on it and helped out Salt Lake City with those fallen trees last 2 days. And that's a big deal to get emergency equipment out through those roads. So thanks, Monty.
Thank you.
I want to move on to talking about September 16th work meeting. That was the additional work meeting that we was going to have with council, but we actually have a combined work meeting with planning, zoning, planning commission and council on the 30th. When I started looking at all the dates and impacting staff for all these meetings, we have 5 meetings coming up in the next 3 weeks. So it's really impacting all the packets got to be put together. So I'm suggesting we actually going to cover on September 30th. We thought it'd be helpful of 2 requests, actually 3 requests. We don't know the third one will be ready, but the first request was the roof pitches. Thought it was a really great conversation to have with council and planning commission, and the single dwelling family conversation. We thought that would be very powerful to have that conversation with council and planning commission on the 30th. So we're going to take 2 task lists off there on the leadership list, and we're trying to get ready. Sherry brought up the town center, and we're actually trying to get some renderings what that layout may look like, but I don't know if we're going to be ready for the 30th meeting or not. So that's kind of a placeholder we have for that. So what I'm recommending to the council is we cancel the September 16th meeting.
Does the council members have any issues with canceling that work meeting on the 16th? So next week. I'm seeing Clint specifically call out that he wants to be there. So you're hearing no objections. So I think as a council, we're fine with canceling that and giving some time back to staff.
We kind of assumed so because we was knocking off some things on the list anyway that we'd be talking about anyway. Like I said, it's the magic of working with planning commission on those issues would be very important too. I want to have Wendy or Troy talk a little bit real quick about it is hunting season. We given direction to talk about end of season wrap up, but just the things we're noticing already. Wendy?
Just really quickly on our side, we really haven't heard many complaints or concerns that have come from any residents. Certainly if you all hear anything, please let us know. The extended archery hunt started in mid-September, will end the end of November. Chief Carr, I think, has had the only concern that has been voiced, and I'll let him talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we've actually had 3 calls up there. We checked stats today, and they weren't even up there. One of them was a buck with a arrow in its shoulder over on Herriman Highway. We never found said buck, but another one was up in UPD's jurisdiction, and then a third was a bow hunter was seen on 11900 South in Carlsbad. But other than that, we haven't had any issues with the actual hunting.
Great.
That's a great change from last year.
Yes.
Yay. I'm glad. It just needed to settle down. It was just new and people just needed to get used to it, and it's okay then. It's awesome.
Yep. We've been in good shape this year.
Good.
The next time I have on the list, we're going to turn some time over to Chief Carr. He didn't get hit with an arrow in his forehead, but it kind of looks like it. But got stitches up today, so.
I wasn't going to ask about it.
Well, yeah, you should see the other guy. He looks much better than me. So I had a little bit of surgery. They decided that they were going to try and put some gray matter back in there, and it just didn't fit. So at any rate, got my stitches out today. I'm feeling better. And Brett likes to tease me quite a bit about it. We talked real quickly about Deputy Chief Reyes retiring. You all know that he left, went up to Washington. It was a significant loss for our agency, but an internal competitive process amongst the lieutenants, which we have 2 of. You both know them, Brian Weidmer and Cody Stromberg. Cody came out number 1 on the list and was promoted to deputy chief. He's worked very hard. I don't think he's on with us tonight. He's over coaching football.
How dare he participate in our community? How dare he?
Right. And you all know Cody's a very community involved person. He'll be a fantastic deputy chief. So once we get to a different place in this COVID process, we'll be in to see all of you and do a pinning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Appreciate that update. We're going to ask Winnie to update us on the rodeo trail construction and then Black Ridge. And I think she'll be done. Oh, go ahead and cover Sept and 118th, all 4.
Okay. As far as the rodeo trails, if he didn't start today, he was downtown trying to help clean up some of the debris and things that were down there. We started the rodeo trails today. It's 3 downhill beginner mountain bike trails, which is great to add to our existing stock of single track trails. It's just under a mile of extra trails that will be here in the city, and we're doing those all in-house. Our Trails and Open Space Coordinator has been training on the equipment, and this will give him a really good opportunity to get some training, increase our trail system in the future without having to hire a professional trail builder. Any questions on that? These trails are just above Black Ridge Reservoir. We may get some questions from residents that live in the area as to what is being built there. That is what is going in. It's not housing, it's trails.
How far away from existing housing is it?
No.
It's not going, really, I'm asking, it's not going close to any houses?
No, and we've gone through the whole process with all of the neighbors. We've gone through planning commission. We've gone through the whole thing. So
Awesome.
Everyone seems to be excited about it so far.
Fantastic.
Black Ridge, with Labor Day weekend kind of closing out our summer seasonal staffing period, we've reduced staff there. Just to give you an idea of some of the data that we've collected from up there, it's about 35 to 36% Herriman residents that visit the reservoir. And that has gone down as the season has extended. When we first opened the reservoir, it was much higher amount of Herriman residents, and as the season went on, it dropped and became more non-residents. 30 to 35% of the use is specifically for trails. The rest is for the reservoir and the park amenities. Justin and the water department picked up testing for the algae because the Division of Water Quality decided not to do it anymore. They lost their funding. So we have been testing for HAB, but we are going to cease testing for it now that the season is over. We will continue to treat throughout the remainder of the secondary water season, just like we always do. So there's no change in that. Are there any questions about Black Ridge?
Yeah, quick question. So 35% is Herriman residents. What percentage was Riverton?
Oh, I will have to go into Smart Sheets and pull that for you.
Okay, if you could just email that to us. As that's a shared that was paid for by both, I'd just like to have an idea if that is coming from residents as well, because that would make sense.
Yeah, most of the additional residents were from our neighboring cities, but I can send you that entire breakdown.
Thank you.
Just a quick correction on that. The actual secondary water, which is was shared cost, but the actual park improvements are 100% paid by Herriman.
You are correct. Thank you for that clarification.
118 South.
118 South, I'm going to punt to Jonathan. He has been tracking this and actually talked to the contractor today. So if Jonathan wants to hop on and update us all on that.
You bet. Some of you might know right now there's a base course trail that's walkway that has been prepared. As some of you might know, that area is private property, so the developer's been working on that. So anyway, we've been tied to their timeline, but in talking with them, they anticipate being paid sometime next week.
So just to To give council an idea of what we're talking about the trail that goes from 60th West to the Advantage Arts Academy that has just opened this year.
Costs and that's been borne by the developer, so it's just trying to get done in time. Okay, so Secret Canyon Circle, Wendy.
Oh, sure. We are almost done with the improvements at Secret Canyon Circle. We're just waiting for the light pole to come in. Should be in within 2 weeks, and we'll have everything in place up there. I don't know if Chief wants to talk about quickly some of the issues that we're seeing in a neighboring cul-de-sac.
Yeah, so over on Sol Vista, I'm sure some of you on the council have heard about it. We're experiencing some similar issues over there. However, they don't seem to be as extreme. They're not breaking the lights. They are doing some fireworks, but we've been up there. Most of it's legal parking, kids being kids, some loud music. But I guess what I'm getting at is some of the problem from Secret Canyon has moved over there. We're trying to address that. Secret Canyon really has settled down for the most part. We've got a good handle on that. However, we do need to address Sol Vista now. So we're working on that. Bear with us. The officers are up there quite frequently, making sure to, they're trying to prevent problems before they start.
I'm sure those residents appreciate it.
One of them does, yeah.
Yep. They've been also, they've already moved the gate there in Secret Canyon, but down by the circle, so it's not giving that extra parking area for people to park up that road. So a lot of work's been done. Great effort by everybody. Appreciate it. I want to talk about Herriman Fire Service Area. As the council gave us direction, separating away from Unified Fire Service Area, we have a short timeline to get a few things accomplished. One of those things that's got a tight timeline is doing a feasibility study on impact fees for the fire service area that we're going to form. And I need to ask the council for a little bit of a mulligan. We want to replace this impact fee with the same impact fee that Unified Fire Service Area is collecting now on each building permit. The problem is the timeline. We need to pass that before October 1st, otherwise it'll be in the January, and Unified Fire Service Area will stop collecting those fees at end of December, and there'll be no fees collected. You have to have a 90-day window from the time you all pass it and sign that to get it approved to go to for us to collect it. So what I'm asking the
If only we were having a meeting on the 16th where we could do that.
Yeah, we're just trying hard. We don't got all the study done, but it's looking promising. We've had some review with that, me and Alan, but we feel like to meet the timeline, we'll have to have it on, if you give the nod, we're asking for something here, to have the hearing and to pass it
On the
and
same
the
night,
resolution on the same night.
as opposed to our normal process, which is do it on a separate night. So does the council have any concerns with that?
I think that because we are not changing the amount of the impact fee collected and that we are just replacing it under our structure with the current one, I don't have any problem with doing that in the same night.
I will correct you though, it may be a little more in there collecting because we have our own study of what fire stations we have to build. So apples to apples, I don't know yet. We can have that for you that night, but it may creep up a little bit, but I don't know already, the preliminary numbers are showing it lower than some other cities around us, so.
So Clint, I would support what Clint said, that if it's going to be the same or less, I'm okay with us doing it on the same night. If it's going to be an increase, I think the public needs to have a chance to have input.
Yeah, our worry is the timeline. If you don't pass it before October 1st, it will give them a couple weeks into January of no impact fees at all collected.
If we need to have a special meeting just to do that, I'm not opposed to that, but let's just get it done.
Can't we just do it the same night we're doing the combined PC meeting? We'll just announce a special city council meeting right before that. That way we keep our same process in place. That way we just keep the process. We are already going to have that meeting anyway on the 30th. So we can just add a little snippet in there of having a special city council meeting for this one issue.
We can do that, Sherry. We'll just have that first meeting starting out and then go to our combined meeting. But in the past, council's also been cautious on that too, because it's not our normal scheduled meeting. And so.
Understood, but it's not a normal thing is the thing now, so.
And I think
That's
we
what-
can communicate clearly to our residents if we need to, because I'm still with Clint here, that if it's the same or less, I think we just go ahead and pass it. But if it does increase and we do need to have it on a second meeting, I think we're just clear in our first meeting that we're gonna do this, that we're, that it's,
The most important part is they'll have the hearing on the 23rd, and that's the most important part for the
Yeah.
public to have input on that. You passing or denying it on the combined, before the combined meeting starts, I'm okay with that, Sherry, and it's a good recommendation.
This is Jared. I'll just add, and that's the only item on that special meeting agenda. That's
Yes.
the problem. That
Yes.
for some reason seems to grow.
yes,
Yes, they do, just like tonight. And the last thing I have is we wanted to talk more about the numbers. Me and Alan have been experienced, but we'll leave that alone. But I do have a comment about the Rose Canyon property. They bought property, Unified Fire Service, they bought 5 acres up Rose Canyon Road across from the Cove to build a future station. They called it 128. They actually, their own dark horse analysis shows that probably is a bad location for that station. Because that's been bought in Herriman city boundaries, that moves to us, and that bond payment is on that, for that property we have to pay for. You remember hearing about that last few weeks. The question me and Alan have raised is this one. They paid $852,000 for that property. Our payments, if we pay it till the end of 2035 on that bond, will pay $882,000. The question to us, are we going to make a profit at the end when it's paid off, or call that note due early and pay it off and make a profit out of that 5 acres? The council get into the development and we sell it off to a developer for housing? Or is it better off for us to push to Unified Fire Services? No, you pay the bond, you get the property, you get the proceeds if you make a profit. There's a chance we could miss out on making about anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000 in that time frame with property costs increase. So I'm looking in the direction of council, what we should do, or give Chase direction as he finishes that, writing that separation agreement with Unified Fire Service area.
thoughts?
I think the council owns enough property, right? The city owns enough property right now that we're having a hard time getting money put back into our coffers on. So that's my opinion.
I understand that there's, a potential, obviously, of making some profit off of the sale of that land, but that land currently is not ours. It was purchased via the district. I tend to agree with Sherry that we just let that be. We don't take that property. We don't pay the bond on that property. We just let them do it, take it, and do what they choose to do with it.
Are there any,
I see Steve nodding. I'm assuming that's directional. I mean, they can still deny us of taking it back too. But
question on
we still
that?
want direction from you, which way we should go with it.
Question on that, Brett. Are there any needs in that area for the city that we've identified, such as parks or anything else that we might need in that area?
It's kind of, we already own property next to it for our wells and a pump station for High Country 2 to provide that water. We will have a road that goes over the top eventually. They'll tie it in 7300 West. That's minus this 5 acres. It's kind of slopey, but that's a very expensive.
We drove out there. It's not. I don't know that there's really any great use for it. I mean, maybe a builder would want to put a couple of houses out there. They're building up the slope anyway, so. But it's kind of across the street from that stake center going up the canyon up there. I just don't know that's a great spot for anything we would want to do.
I have a question for Alan. The 800, Brett, you said 882 in bond payments from here to the end. So does that 882 not include what we've already paid?
That's correct. Alan can answer that. But
so the question would be, what have we already paid that then we're missing?
The problem is when they refinanced the bond, they went back and they just started over again. They didn't decrease the amount. Does that make sense to you? So
Right, 'cause-
it started the clock all over again, which was a terrible idea.
Yeah, exactly. You've already paid hundreds of thousands of dollars already, and you would essentially just be giving
Where's that
to
noise
you
coming
today. I don't see any harm in keeping the property and selling up. I mean, it's going to increase what we pay out in the bond payments, plus hopefully get some of that back. If it's a wash, it's a wash. It doesn't. I don't really have a strong opinion. I just don't want to wash $1,000 away unnecessarily, and it complicates the separation agreement. I don't know how UFSA board would feel about throwing another wrench into it. So just a couple things.
Jared, this is Alan. The current balance on that bond is about $700,000. The 882 includes the interest from now till 2035. So that's the total payments. It is callable before that. If you were to sell it, you would just be paying whatever the amount of principal was at the time it's called. But the 882 is both principal and interest that goes clear out to 2035.
What's the principal left?
It's roughly $700,000.
What's your opinion, Alan, of our best course?
My best guess would be to say we ought to see what it's worth and then make a decision based on what the value is.
That's kind of where I'm going. Is what's it really worth?
So how quick can we get an actual appraisal?
That'll be a couple $1,000 to get appraisal on that property. But that's, you know, if we want to go spend more money on it or see if they're amenable. When me and Alan talked about, well, I think it was yesterday, look at the numbers and the pace, the bond schedule and stuff. If they would have paid more for it when we thought they paid 1.4 for it, that's what we initially told. We said, no, it doesn't work at all for us. But now it's lower. It could be valuable to the city as a revenue stream down the road after it's been paid off. And they have a call in, I think, they have a 10-year call on that, and it's 2016, so it's 2026, they have an early call on that. We could pay it off at that point and sell it.
And with, if I'm not mistaken, there's like 15 years left on the bond total. I just took the 882 over the 15 years. It's $58,800 a year. So if we got UFSA to agree to it, it would lower our bond payment by a little less than $60,000 a year.
That's correct.
So is the current proposal for the separation includes us taking over that bond payment on that land? Is that accurate, Jared?
Yes, we just have a percentage of the total outstanding bond, and then any property that's within our boundaries we keep. So that includes this piece. So the more we're talking about it, the more I'm thinking that it kind of makes sense to keep it.
Yeah, that's kind of where my thought was going too. Is tell me if I'm not getting this right. Is right now our agreement is that we're gonna take the property and make the payment on it. If we push it back, we're gonna say we're not gonna get the payment and we're not gonna get the property. Is that a wash? Is that? I guess we just don't know what it's worth and whether or not it's worth. I mean, if it's worth $900,000 right now and we only owe $700,000 on it, we could sell it right now.
Now the property on Herriman Boulevard that they purchased, we purchased half of it and they paid $225,000 about, because the way in agreement they spent monies out of fund balance to buy that property. If we rebuild 103 at a different location, if we provide a location for 103 to be rebuilt, that property just automatically gets transferred to us. So we don't owe any more on that property. So we do get that property free and clear, not have to pay any bond monies on that one, that piece of property. And then we get the station of 103 and the property underneath it, where I have
One
that.
for 128 is that we will need a station out there or thereabouts some point in the future, that we would essentially sell this piece of property and buy the piece of property where Black Horse or wherever we determine the proper location is. So again, the more we talk about it, the more I think it makes sense to keep it. We've already invested a bunch of money in it since we've been paying bond payments since 2016. So we've already invested a bunch in it. We're going to need a piece of property in the future. What's the downside to keeping it?
Just getting permission to spend that extra, $58,000-$60,000 a year on towards the bond is all.
I think I'm in agreement with Jared. I think for
We
me,
just felt like it wasn't our decision to make.
I think we should hold on to it, and partly because I don't want to throw any wrenches in a separation agreement when we've already got the okay from, the essential okay from the other organization. I don't want to cause any problems, as well with the fact that we're getting property. We should be, if it comes out of the wash, fine, but the fact that we've prevented ourselves from having an issue with the separation agreement, I think it's worth it.
I think and Chase, you might need to correct me on this one, to Brett's point about 103 and rebuilding it. I think there's a clause in the agreement somewhere that even with the property for 128, if we were to sell it, we would then have to take those proceeds and use it for a new station, right? It has to be for similar purpose. We couldn't just pocket the money and be in the land investing business, like Sherry said. Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't recall that specific provision in the agreement that Rachel Anderson sent over. I'm looking through it right now just to see, though.
I don't think it's in the separation agreement, but it's in like the interlocal or one or the other. Because that was part of the issue with Riverton, the last we had.
That'd be more for an existing building and not just raw land.
Yeah, I mean, in Riverton's case, they were concerned about the building, but the way I read that piece of the agreement, the interlocal they were talking about, it just said property.
Yeah, Jared, that is in there. Actually, they did include that in the separation agreement. So
that, I mean, if it's just trying to save, the $60,000 a year in bond payments, just the future planner in me says, well, we've already invested money into that ground, even at 882, even if we use a relatively low valuation of 200,000 per acre at the going price, we're still over that amount, right, for our payoff. And we're going to need a location for another station out there somewhere in the future. That actually kind of seems like a good investment.
Well, I'll just say that my apologies. I kind of misinterpreted the initial part of the conversation as that the discussion it was open of how to handle that piece of property rather than it already being basically included in a proposed separation agreement. So clarification on that and better understanding on my part, I would also support at this point just keeping it.
Yeah, I agree. There was much more clarification once the conversation got rolling. It was not just this piece of property. It's very encumbered by some other agreements, it sounds like.
Steve, any other thoughts? Okay, all right. It sounds like staff has direction that we'll just hold on to the property.
Okay, the last thing I had was just remind council, Steve, Councilman Shields brought this up last council meeting, the SOPs, policy, RFPs, and check approval processes. Those will be coming for you in the September 23rd work meeting.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, any further items?
I have one quick item, Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
And I can just add this to our task list that we have there, if the council agrees. But again, I think we need to have staff with input from us work on a plan of getting us back together for our council meetings there, in the chambers. I think we have the way to social distance. It doesn't mean we need all of staff in there as well. We can still do this format, obviously, with them in their offices to help spread things out. But I'm of the opinion that, you know what, we're sending our kids to school for all day. Under the current conditions, I believe that we should have a path and a plan in place now to get us back in there for the few hours, you know, for our meetings. I think it's more beneficial. So I would just like that on there and have a plan that we can all come to agreements with and start moving in that direction.
I'm
For
supportive.
what it's worth, I
100%
would second
agree.
that.
I'm supportive
Me
of that.
too.
Yeah. So we'll start. We'll task staff with start working towards that. I don't know when that will happen exactly, but we'll have them start working towards that. So
We've been talking about it quite a bit about when we pull those triggers. We can social distance council in this chamber. We're going to put staff back, but we'll have the back piece where the public can attend. It'll shorten the distance, how much public can be in this room with us, but we have figured out, and then those non-essential directors will not be attending.
Okay. All right, with that.
Yeah, I'd like to see a plan in place for the 20th if possible.
Okay, with that, we do need to move on to our other meetings. So I will accept a motion to adjourn our work meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned. We have 2 meetings that we need to get through. The first. We're stopping and restarting the recording. Give me just a second. Okay. So we're going to real quick move into our short meeting, which should be the Special Community Development and Renewal Agency meeting of Herriman City. We will start with a motion to review and outline the finalization process to approve the minutes of September 9th, 2020.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to have the minutes of September 9th, 2020 be prepared and distributed to each member of the Redevelopment Agency Board. The board will have 10 days to review the minutes and submit any changes to the secretary. If after 10 days there are no changes, the minutes will stand approved. If there are changes, the process will be followed until all changes are made and the board is in agreement.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion passes. Just a quick side note for staff. Is there a way that we, as we do this on every single meeting, is there a way we can add this to policy or on this agency that we can simply make that the policy so that we don't have to go through that process every time we meet? Staff will look into that. Okay. Well, let's.
This is an easier one. But
this is the easiest one.
This is the
easiest one.
So
That's what I needed to know. So thank you. All right, we'll move on to 2.1, discussion pertaining to the participation agreement with Herriman 73 Partners, LLC for the designation of the Auto Mall as a project area and the sales tax incentive for the project. Chase.
Thank you. So this is a participation agreement that I believe you have seen already. It kind of stalled out before our former city attorney was replaced, and I'm now picking it up and trying to get this brought in for a landing. And I apologize because I did not provide a copy of this in the packet. That was my fault. I assumed that I had, but I did not. I have gone through that, however, and I made a few minor adjustments to the participation agreement, again, that I believe you've already seen. And just a little bit of background on this. So in December of 2019, the city council entered into an interlocal agreement with the CDRA for a sales tax incentive, where in the CDRA would receive 70% of the point of sale tax.
Sorry, we missed that. Somebody whose microphone was moving around. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, so in December of 2019, did you hear that part?
Yes.
I'll start. Okay. I'll back up to that point. In December of last year, the city entered into an interlocal agreement with the CDRA, wherein the CDRA would receive 70% of the point of sales tax collected in that project area. That has not gone into effect yet. That is for the agency to decide when that term begins. However, that interlocal agreement has been executed. The participation agreement, again, that I forgot to send to you, and that's my fault. I did not include that in the packet and did not realize that until just now, but I will send you a copy of that so you'll have a version to look through as we work through potentially approving this participation agreement. But I've gone through that participation agreement, made a few minor changes, essentially under that agreement, the CDRA would take out of that 70% point of sale tax that they receive from the city, any obligations that they're owed or that they're due to pay. And that would include the statutory 10% required to maintain for housing. And then they would take the remainder amount and provide that as an incentive under this participation agreement for Herriman 73 partners in connection with the auto mall. That tax incentive would be used to put in infrastructure, to purchase additional land, to provide incentives for partners that they would be working with to bring them into to the project area as they develop that out. So again, I apologize, you don't have a copy of this, so you're not able to reference back to that and provide a lot of feedback on that. But this is something we wanted to get on your agenda and on your radar as we look forward and as we plan on developing out that area and working with Herriman 73 partners and using this as a potential tool to do that.
Chase, it seemed like when we first saw this, it was just kind of like a hand over the money and we didn't maintain any oversight over it. It seemed like that those were some real concerns over the original language in the agreement. But it's been a while, it's just kind of foggy, but it seems like that was some of the biggest concerns. Did you see that and did you address that?
So there is some broad language about how the tax incentive can be used. So it does provide that it will be turned over to the participant, in this case, Herriman 73 partners, but it does specify that they have to use that for specific purposes. One of those purposes is that, again, public infrastructure, incentives to businesses and other partners that would potentially come in and contribute to the development of that. But the language is pretty broad sweeping in that nature. I feel comfortable with it. You could shore that up a little bit more if that was a concern that the council had. And again, that's something we can discuss after I send you a copy of the agreement and you have that in front of you. But that is something that we could shore up potentially. I know that was some of the background that was given to me, some of your prior concerns when you last saw this, I think back in January at one of your meetings. So I attempted to make some minor changes in that regard. But I think, and I don't believe that we have Larry on, the participant in this case, but that was one of the things that they expressed interest in, is having some flexibility to use that to entice potential businesses to come in and have some flexibility there while still giving us some control about making sure that it's being used to, again, redevelop that area and provide an incentive to the city.
So why would we give the money to the developer to give incentives instead of the city giving the incentive?
That's a great question. And it's, again, just one way of doing it. We could require a participation agreement with each one of the businesses that came in and make them an individual participant and part of this tax incentive that's given from the city to the CDRA. I guess it just adds a layer, and that may be a layer of control that the city wants. It may not be something that the developer particularly wants, because they might lose some of that control to bring in businesses. But that, again, that is something that we could definitely consider and look at.
Well, I totally understand the developer maybe desiring to control the piggy bank, but that well, our job is to safeguard public funds. To Sherry's point, my recollection of this item back in January was simply that there was no detail, there was nothing, and we wanted to know what the detail was. So I'm interested to see what detail there is here, but that general point is pretty concerning to me. I don't want this to just be a pass-through, hand the money to the developer with basically no strings and say, you can use it. We're going to use public funds to let them buy more land and not have any say in that. Or I don't know. We make sure we have some safeguards and controls.
And that's a great point, Jared. And that is one of the things I looked at. And when I went through this, and we did shore up a little bit of that language to make sure that it was tied to the development of the project area. And maybe we shore that up even more and add additional strings to make sure that it is being used for that purpose. And that's definitely something that we can do. This is a very early stage of the agreement. I've spoken with the developer or the participant and let them know, we're probably a ways off from getting this approved, but we hopefully are moving in the right direction and getting those sorts of things worked out in the future.
So we look
So I
forward
will-
to seeing those.
I will send that out. And again, I apologize. That was my fault. I thought that I had sent that out and I apparently did not, but I will make sure that this body gets that as soon as possible. So.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, that is the last item for our agenda for this meeting. I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
A motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We will take a quick, very quick 5-minute break. It is 7:28. We will start our general meeting at 7:35. We'll just call it 7:35. So we'll take a short break before we start our next meeting. Throw us on mute. still on mute. All right, Jared, are you with us? Oh, thank you for being back with us, Sherry. We just have to wait for one more council member before we can begin. Steve is back, so we will go ahead and get started. So I'd like to welcome everyone out today. We will go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance, which I will lead as we get the camera tilted here to see the flag. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
I
to the
pledge
flag
allegiance
of the
to the
United
flag
States of America,
of the United States of America,
and to the republic
and
for
to
which
the
it
republic
stands,
for which it
one
stands,
nation, under
one
God,
nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty
indivisible,
and
with
justice for all.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you kindly for participating. We will go ahead and move on to item 4.2, City Council comments and recognitions. None? I do have a couple, if there aren't any from the council members. First off, I would just like to congratulate our new deputy chief, Cody Stromberg, on his promotion. He has been a valuable asset to our city for some time, and we look forward to him continuing to serve our police department. Along with that, I do also want to express my appreciation to the entire police department. Recently, I've noticed that they have been quite visible in our community. Today, I saw them working with a traffic accident right outside my house, as well as doing traffic enforcement on Mountain View Corridor. I appreciate the effort and time that they put into to keeping our city safe. I do also want to thank our city staff, particularly those that have gone up to help the Salt Lake County in disaster relief with the windstorm that happened. Outside my home, just down the street from my home, there was a tree that was blown over at the roots, and it was maybe an hour before the city had come in and removed the tree and put a big cone in the hole and gotten it taken care of. So the response time from our staff is extremely good, and I just want to express my appreciation for the efforts they do to keep our community safe and running. So thank you very much.
Hey, Mayor, I do have
Please.
one other thing I'd like to add. I was driving in Herriman today, and just kind of along Herriman Main Street, and I saw a couple just out with some garbage bags, just walking along picking up trash. Just a shout out to the great residents that we have that are take pride in the cleanliness of our community, and just wanting to put forth some extra effort just to walk along, and because there was certainly a lot of trash blown around, not to mention trees, but there's smaller trash, and I was so impressed to see this couple just randomly walking along and just doing a great job picking up trash. So thanks to the great residents we have that try and help maintain that in our city.
Thank you very much. Any others? All right. We will go ahead and move on to our public comment section of our meeting. Audience members may bring any item to the City Council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the City Council may submit comments by emailing recorder@herriman.org or by visiting herriman.org/agenda and minutes, where there will be a link to join the electronic meetings to submit a comment. Your statement would then be read into the public record. With that, we will open our meeting to public comment. As there is no member of the public in our audience, as they are all being kind and social distancing, I will look to our staff to see if we have any electronic. Okay, seeing none electronic, we will go ahead and close the public comment portion of our meeting. We will go on to item 6, which is City Council Board and Committee reports.
I had a board report from the water board today. Hang on here. We sold a record 18,000 acre feet of water in August. That's the most the district has ever sold. So just know that water use is up. That's partly because of the extremely dry August we had, and growth attributes to that too. But so there was a large amount of water sold last month. And then just a point of interest, I believe it could have been the warmest record ever on Earth, but so there's conflicting evidence whether it was the third warmest or the warmest. But at Death Valley last month, it hit 130 degrees. So that is a little toasty. And then I don't know if Wendy wants me to announce this or not, but regardless, sorry. We approved the grant today. The Herriman submitted a request for grant money from Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District for $46,324 that will go towards the Big Bend Park and the landscape design for the city detention basins and the park strips that we talked at length about a few weeks ago. So that grant money was approved. It won't pay for it all, but that the member will have to have a portion contributed to the cost also. But the grant money was awarded successfully today for the city on those two projects. And that's all.
Thank you.
So I've got a report, excuse me, I've got a report from the Association of Municipal Councils. We had our meeting yesterday, and there was some really interesting information from Dr. Vitek and Dr. Litvak from the county regarding some COVID updates. Prior to this information, the most important or the most significant way to get an accurate test for COVID was the nasal swabs. And they have to send that off to a lab, and it would take number of days to get back. And that would give us the most accurate information. They've developed a new rapid test that can be done at the point of care without a lab that uses saliva. It is slightly less accurate than the nasal swab, but it's pretty close. It's very, very close in determining positives, and it's slightly less effective in being able to determine a negative. So they're going to be using those. There's 1.5 million of those tests are coming to the state, and they should be able to generate results in 15 minutes with those. So the state health department is talking with local leaders, trying to distribute those and determine where the best use of those 1.5 million tests will be. But I thought that was good information for us to have. They also said that they expect the first vaccine doses to be able to arrive in Utah before November 1st. They're being told it's going to be approximately 23,000 doses. But the way that this vaccine is going to work is you're going to have to take one dose, then have a second dose 28 days later. So there's really only 11,500 people that would be able to receive the vaccine with this initial shipment. They're still determining the priority list and how that's going to be disseminated to the public and who are the most at risk to receive those. But at least the first tests are going to be, the first vaccines will be coming in around November 1st. The bad news is it looks like these are going to be similar to like a flu vaccine, meaning you'll get it and then a year later you'll need another vaccine. So we'll have to see how effective that is and what's going on, but I know that there are really high-risk people that this will be some important news for. I think that is about it from that meeting, but important and interesting information regarding COVID and vaccines and more effective rapid testing coming on board.
Thank you, Steve.
Mayor, can I actually don't have any of my committees to report on. However, I just looked and happened to notice that Chief Whittison is, which I'm really surprised, is listening in on our meeting. And if I could, if the council would allow, I think it's appropriate that we ask maybe Chief Whittison if he is available to give a quick update on really the activities of UFA and their deployments. I happen to know about that. Chief Whittison himself has been deployed and is actually redeploying again today. So Chief Whittison, are you able to hear us and give us a quick update?
It'd be appreciated. Yes, please. Give him a moment because he probably wasn't expecting it.
I'm sure not. Definitely putting him on the spot.
Probably sitting in his
All right,
pajamas.
can you hear me now?
Oh, there he is. All right.
Gotcha.
I'm not in my pajamas. We are on the road, heading to Reno tonight to stay overnight, awaiting our orders for this next California deployment. So, but yeah, just a quick update on EMAC deployments. And EMAC is Emergency Management Assistant Compact. It's an agreement between states when there's a state of emergency for whatever reason. This happens to be a wildfire event where the governor declares a state of emergency and they ask for assistance from other states that are part of this compact. State of Utah is part of that, and municipalities are those that fulfill that order for the emergency assistance. So on August 22nd, during the lightning went through the northern part of California and started, really thousands of fires. Most of those converged into multiple very large fires and complexes that the state of California was not able to manage with the resources they had. So they did an EMAC request, and Utah responded to that with 2 task forces. And just a task force is a group of engines, different typings of fire engines that are wildland capable, that will respond. So Utah responded with 2 task forces that comprised of multiple different agencies in Salt Lake and Utah County. Those resources responded to Northern California, and this is in the just south of Redding is where these fires were occurring, some of these larger fires, and impacting some communities there. And there was also fires going further south, but we were a good resource to send up into this particular area. So both task forces responded to the northern part of California. We spent 14 work days on the fire and did multiple different assignments, direct firefighting in large timber fuel type, and the crews did really, really well. Both task forces returned home safely about 2 days ago, and it was a successful mission. On the way home, however, you might have heard on the news that there was other fires that were starting. The Creek Fire in particular, and this prompted another EMAC request from the state of California. So again, Utah responded, and the municipalities came together, and we're sending 2 task forces again. Right now, we're just on the road. We're en route to Reno to remain overnight, and we still have not received our direct orders on where we're going to report. However, we are going to be up in the Northern California area.
Thank you for that report. We appreciate it. And we're grateful that we're able to assist our neighboring states, as we know they would assist us in a similar emergency.
Mayor, if I can just make an additional comment on this. Obviously, I think it's very appropriate to recognize the efforts of, our local first responders. Obviously, something near and dear to me is they go and assist. We are dealing with, honestly, unprecedented times in terms of the fire activity, the size of the fires, and honestly, the requests that are coming via EMACs to the state for assistance. honestly, in my career over the past 25 years, it's only been within the last 3-4 years that these EMACs have really even come into fruition, and now they seem like they're constant. And primarily, they've been in California, and obviously we've had crews there already this year. They're headed back again, and I can tell you that it's not now just isolated to California. I'm aware also that Oregon has put out an EMAC request today, and I've been working through my other channels to help try and fulfill that, as well as they have an estimated 2.5 million acres burning in Oregon right now, and some of their smaller towns that are being there's so much activity right now, it's hard for them to even report on it, but they've had some of their smaller towns south of Medford that have been virtually destroyed as that fire is marching forward north towards Medford and actually towards urban Portland. And really, I just say that one to recognize the efforts of our firefighters here that are going out to help assist, because I think honestly, a lot of times we don't necessarily realize what they're doing for us on a daily basis. And we've had those same challenges here locally just within the last couple of days with the extreme weather conditions that we saw. And again, it's really affecting the West. We had the large wind event. And I just think it's appropriate to be able to call out their efforts, especially as we approach 9/11, the anniversary of 9/11, and all those first responders that gave that ultimate sacrifice on that day, those many years ago, that of course will stick with all of us. But I appreciate Chief Whittison, one, just being on the phone for our meeting tonight as he is traveling as that task force leader heading back out there to still fulfill his obligations as our liaison to our community, but to be able to give us that report. So thanks for giving me a few minutes.
Absolutely.
That was awesome, Clint. I'm glad you explained about the guys coming back. I was watching the news the other night, and I saw you warmly embracing a bunch of big, burly guys, and I just wasn't sure what the context was, so I'm glad you explained that.
I will tell you that most of the guys, obviously, these are primarily structure guys that are going out on these assignments, but their favorite thing about these assignments is that they actually don't have to shave for that entire 2 weeks that they're gone. And so they always come home looking vastly different than they do on a normal day. So yes, we were glad to get those back. And again, the department I work for, we sent 4 more as well. They're actually traveling and will be working as part of Chief Whittison's task force again, as they were the last deployment as well. So he's a fantastic leader, or we're lucky to have him as part of our liaison here in Herriman. He brings a lot of expertise and things that will truly benefit all of our communities as we continue to deal with our own struggles here.
Thank you, Clint, and we appreciate you bringing that up, and absolutely important to continue to remember those things, and grateful for you bringing them in for us. With that, if there's no further, I will move on to item 7.1, which is the presentation of the CAFR and the PAFR award. Give the time over to Tammy Moody, our Assistant City Manager.
Oh, thank you, Mayor and Council. I am pleased to announce that once again, Herriman City we are the proud recipients of the CAFR and PAFR awards. So for those that aren't completely familiar with what that means, the CAFR is the Comprehensive Financial or the Annual Financial Report. It is huge. It's a giant book full of all of our financial reporting information, and it provides accurate and meaningful information regarding the city's financial status and our performance. And then the PAFR, which, if this will move, there we go. The PAFR takes all of that information from the comprehensive report and narrows it down to about, I think this year ours was 15 pages, and makes it more easily digestible for the public. So hence the popular annual financial report, because it is much more popular than its larger sister. This report is It has more graphics, it's easier to read, and it just calls out the most pertinent information from those reports so that it's easy to follow along and see what the current status of the city's finances are. The awards, so if you want to advance to the next slide, thank you. It represents a significant accomplishment for government and their management, and Herriman City has received this award for 6 consecutive years. And that coincides with the time that our finance director, Alan Ray, has been with us. So we're very appreciative of all that he has brought to the city and the way that he represents our city so well when it comes to our finances. Alan has also worked very closely with the communications department and mainly John LaFollette. So we want to make sure that we give credit in all the areas where credit is due, because by working together, they have really created a report that is not only rich in information, but it's rich in presentation as well. And we're really proud of what they've put together and the way that they've represented our city. I would like to turn the time over to Alan for just a moment so that he can talk about some of the comments that were received in the report and what that means. So Alan, if you're there and you want to log on, that would be great.
I'm here. You know, on our CAFR report this year, it was interesting that all of the comments we got had to do with the information provided to us by URS. They screwed up in 3 or 4 different spots. Actually, they weren't screw ups. They are new pronouncements that they were not completely current on. So all of the comments we got this year had to do with URS's piece of our report. But we actually were, when you look at the comments this year, it was as clean as I've ever experienced. So it was really good for us. We're in the process right now of creating the one for this year. We had our auditors here last week for their field work, so we are moving forward with that. Their report on us so far, which we won't get the final report on it for a couple more months, but because we're still going through some of the process, but so far they're giving us pretty high remarks. When we look at the popular financial report, there aren't as many guidelines. The checklist for the CAFR is about 240 pages long. And we got a clean report this year, but when you go to the PAFR report, what they're really looking for is if you stay true to the information that's in the CAFR, that the information that you're presenting in a summarized view gives a true picture of what the entire report shows. And, you know, I can't say enough about the work that John LaFollette does on this PAFR, but, you know, I help him boil it down, but then he makes it look great, and he does just a wonderful job with it. And, you know, it's come a long way since we include the communications, because I used to do these myself and they didn't look nearly this good. But, you know, thanks, Tammy.
So we just want to, again, thank Alan and John for the efforts that they put into this report and for representing Herriman so well. Unless there's any questions, that's all we have.
No, I don't know if there's any questions, but any comments by the council other than just applause that you're getting on screen?
I think that, again, Tammy, to your point, 6 years running now, that this award has been received, I think is tremendous. And obviously we have very talented staff. You already pointed out that coincides with how long Alan has been with the city and what he's been able to do there. But again, the tie-in and the work together with communications, which obviously all started with you, and now has been carried on through your staff as that department has grown, and how that has enhanced that report, and again made it. I've seen many of PAFR that are supposed to be easily digestible that are not so easily digestible because it's still a lot of numbers. So the fact that we actually have a PAFR that really is just that, is easily digestible, and is good for someone like me that has lots of pictures and graphs and fewer numbers, is, again, I think it speaks to the level of transparency that staff has really taken that vision of council and really, embodied that and put that into play to allow, again, that transition from the CAFR to the PAFR, for that to stay true and it to be very easily understood by our residents. So my applauds go out to the entire staff there for making this happen, again, 6 years running. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
Yep. I think Clint has said it for us, and I've seen quite a few of these now, and they continue to be excellent. And we are greatly appreciative of making it something that not only us as council members, but our residents truly can understand. So thank you very much. With that, we will move on to item 8.1, public hearing related to the Parks, Recreation, and Trail Impact Fee enactment. Chase, I believe this is something that we heard, that we opened at our last meeting, and this is our second meeting that we've had it open. Is that correct?
So that's actually incorrect, Mayor. So this is a separate public hearing related to the impact fees. So under the Impact Fee Act, we're required to have public hearings on both the impact fee facilities plan, impact fee analysis as one hearing, and then a separate hearing on the actual enactment. The enactment embodies the findings of the IFA, and it incorporates the maximum fee found justified by the IFA. And the enactment is really just another name for the ordinance that's adopted by the council to make that impact fee applicable going forward. Under the state code, you are required, again, to have a hearing on this particular issue. So that's what this hearing would be for. It has been noticed up. Public has been given an opportunity to review the enactment that I prepared. And then at the end of the public hearing, the city council can adopt the maximum impact fee justified by the impact fee analysis, or they can adopt a different fee based upon community feedback or other factors. So this hearing today would be for the impact fee enactment. And then at the end of this hearing, the council, if they do decide to adopt it at the next meeting, which would be September 23rd, it would go into effect December 22nd, 2020 would be the effective date of the enactment when the city could begin collecting the new impact fee rates.
Thank you. I appreciate that. With that, I will go ahead and open the public hearing. As we have nobody in the audience today, I will move to our staff to see if we have any electronic. Okay, we do not currently have any electronic. So I will accept a motion. If there's no discussion on this, I'd be happy to accept a motion on what we do with this particular item.
Mayor, I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay. I have a motion.
Can I just ask for an item of clarification before we have a second to that? We don't anticipate any changes to this that would maybe benefit us for leaving this public hearing open. Is that correct?
Chase, we're looking at you on that one.
So you can leave the hearing open to provide additional time for the public to give feedback. The council's decision really comes down to the fee that's collected, right? The other minutia in the enactment, I shouldn't call it minutia because it's not that. It's less impactful, for a lack of a better term, than the actual fee that's being charged under the impact fee analysis. So generally, public feedback and public clamor is directed at the amount of the fee. So if this council finds that there is value in leaving it open to give public additional time to provide feedback, you could absolutely do that and leave it open for another meeting. Keep in mind that there is that 90-day waiting period under the statute. So you cannot start collecting the fee for 90 days until 90 days after it is accepted. So.
But we could leave this this hearing open to provide that additional time till our next meeting, close it and take action on it at that time if we so chose.
Correct. Yeah. The public has been provided 10 days. That's the statutory requirement. I think, in fact, we did even more than that. I think Jackie was able to notice that up with 12 days.
She is confirming that's correct.
So 12 days notice, which is more than what's required by the statute, but the hearing absolutely could remain open.
Okay, so with that clarification that's been given, we do have a motion on the table. Do I have a second to that particular motion? And that motion is to close the public hearing. Okay, not seeing a second on that item, I'm happy to take further discussion or another motion.
The only hesitance I have about leaving it open for another meeting is, again, it's not a set written policy, but consistency with procedure is we don't act upon something on the same night we have a public hearing. So if we have a public hearing again next meeting and we close it next meeting, typically we would not act upon it until the following meeting. So those are my only issues with it about leaving it open is, and I'm fine with leaving it open, but in my view, then it shouldn't be acted upon the next meeting.
Maybe we need to codify or memorialize our kind of unwritten rule, because the way I'd always interpreted that was simply that we didn't act on the first night. So the first time something was up for a public hearing, we don't act on it that night, but continue it at least one. And so if we've done that and continued it at least once, then I think we're being consistent and could close that night. But if we're not voting on it tonight, I don't see any reason not to leave it open and then vote.
And just as precedent, I think we did that with the other impact fees, right? With the general plan we just adopted, right?
Yes.
So we kept them open and then closed them and took action the following week. So I think Jared's explanation is at least how I understand it, and I'm okay doing it that way.
And I would second the idea of codifying that. I think that would eliminate some of the confusion if we just stated that this is simply the policy.
So I think that we've now done that our practice will be, we will not take action on the first night that it's open for public hearing. And then if it comes up for another meeting, we may possibly take action if we so choose.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jay.
Okay. I was just going to say, if we do want to formalize that rule, that would be something we could put in the council rules of procedure. I would just caution against that because there may be instances where it is appropriate to take action on an item that you hear the first time. And so painting yourself into a corner might not be the appropriate thing to do in every scenario. For example, we do have an item on tonight's agenda that you'll be hearing for the first time, and I'll explain the circumstances behind that, why we're directing you as staff to make a decision on that tonight. So we do have a perfect example of that tonight, but ultimately, if you do decide to do that, that is something we could put into a formalized provision of your.
Chase, that is specifically why I use the word practice and not policy. Our practice is that we will not do that. That is our practice, not necessarily a policy.
There's an important distinction, Chase. I would say that those items tonight don't actually fall under what we're talking about. What we've been traditionally concerned about with this particular issue is public hearing, right? So if something is a public hearing, at least my experience has been that there's a lot of the public that might not have been aware of it the first meeting when there was a public hearing, and they've come to the next meeting and it was already decided, and the council looks around and says, well, nobody said anything. And so we started with things that were on for a public hearing where we're soliciting public response to help us make a decision, that we just don't decide on those public hearing issues the first night of a public hearing. But
that's a great point.
Thank you.
Honestly, I think the idea is that People may not have understood what some of the discussion items were. They may not have understood the impact of it. Just because it's on the agenda doesn't necessarily mean they fully have comprehended what the impacts could be to them or their neighbors. And so it gives them a week to get more information, to get organized, to get their other neighbors involved, to really come and express and engage with the council about what their opinions on the matter are. And so that, I think that's why we've established that practice, whether it's a fee or it's an MDA or a zoning change or anything like that. We want to have the public have ample opportunity to give their input to us, because at least I know for me, that feedback is really, really meaningful. So, but you did kind of steal my thunder. That's exactly what my thought was. If we painted ourselves into a corner by making that a written codified policy, then we don't have the flexibility to take action in an emergency situation or something that we really need to act urgently on.
Yeah, no, thanks for the discussion. And honestly, the reason I asked the question is because I think we're all on the same page that we want to provide as much opportunity to provide input and for our residents to understand these items that come up for public hearing as possible, especially given the times where I think most residents would find it challenging to appropriately engage and give that comment sometimes where we're social distancing and very few of us are at council and maybe not being able to navigate the technology piece of it to do that formal comment. But again, I think we're all on the same page that we just want to provide that ample opportunity to understand and to make comments. So appreciate that.
Clint, that almost sounded like a motion.
Well, I'm prepared to make a motion that we leave open and continue the public hearing of item 8.1 to our next meeting.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Okay, I have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 That motion passes. All right, we will move on to our consent agenda. I'll accept the motion.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Jared,
Yes.
Clint,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Sherry.
Yes.
I will vote yes, that motion passes. So we will move on to item 10.1, discussion and consideration of a resolution adopting the form of a master license agreement for small cell wireless facilities within Herriman. Chase.
Thank you, council. This is kind of the city attorney show tonight, so I apologize you get so much feedback from me and discussion, but hopefully you understand that to mean that we're getting a lot done, which is a good thing. So this is an item that we've had before on the, I believe on the work meeting. We have prepared a master license agreement under state statute. As you recall, the legislature codified the Small Cell Wireless Facilities Deployment Act, which allows service providers to come into cities and requires that cities provide them an opportunity to install their facilities within public right-of-ways. So we have prepared a master license agreement that essentially simplifies the process of getting those types of facilities in place. As you recall, in my last presentation on this, the act requires that any agreements, or rather that all service providers be treated equally. It's been best practice throughout the state to kind of adopt a master license agreement that service providers just fill in the blanks, because that essentially carries out that legislative policy of treating these service providers equally. There are some things, again, that the city has some power to control. That's one of the things that we talked about last time and that I got feedback from this council on, would be specifically the design elements of these small cell wireless facilities. At the last meeting, you did give me some instruction to change up Section 5 of the master license agreement that I prepared to allow the city to control that design element a little bit more. I've done that. I've altered the language that would allow the city to come in and essentially change the scope of the design guidelines. Again, we have to treat everyone equally, but we can allow them to choose design guidelines that we have pre-approved from a specific set of guidelines. Those have been attached to the master license agreement. I know Blake and his team prepared those. They put a lot of work into doing that. And And so I believe I accomplished that. I know I provided a copy of that within your packet. Again, that was section 5, where specifically subsection B, where we were able to change up that language and allow the city council to approve the form of the master license agreement based upon the guidelines, but also have the power to come in and change those in the future if they ever needed to. So I'm happy to take any questions or feedback on this form of the master license agreement.
Any comments or questions or concerns?
With that agreement, will there be any addendum that has photographs representing what we're talking about, or specific design examples? I'm just curious as to whether or not we're just going to give a description of it, or we're actually going to provide pictures of what it would need to look like.
It's in Exhibit C. They do have some, or at least on the ones that aren't allowed.
That's a good question, Councilmember Shields. In practice, how this would work is the service provider is required to obtain a site license. So simply entering into this licensing agreement with the city does not enable them to come in and start putting up small cell facilities throughout the city. They would have to execute a site license, and as part of that site license, they would submit their design of the facility that they would be installing, and it would fall within the scope of what we have approved or what you would potentially approve here. And city staff at that point would say, no, this doesn't comply with what we've already approved. You have to change it to meet this standard or this color or whatever the design criteria are that we approve. Staff would then be able to deny a site license, which they would need to obtain in order to actually install that facility.
Sorry, thank you.
Chase, I did have a question as we're looking in Section C, the design guidelines. I'm looking at one of the questions I think or comments I made last time was making sure that we specifically had the ability to ensure that, particularly on freestanding poles, that they still have to match our basically our look. And I do see that we do have something there that says the antenna pole attachment should be shrouded to meet Herriman City's aesthetic. Is that sufficient to require, for example, them to use our at the base of our lights that has the Herriman City logo on and stuff on that? Is that sufficient for us to be able to require that?
It is, and that would be one of those things that in practice in other cities I've seen service providers make accommodations to their design to fit that kind of aesthetic criteria that the city would establish. Obviously, service providers are concerned mostly about getting in the facility and the infrastructure, and they're willing to, in what I've seen in practice, accommodate on things like the design. And so I do believe that language is sufficient to allow staff to require those things before approving a site license.
Okay, that was my biggest concern. I just want to make sure that I want them to stand out as little as possible, and if they look like all of our other poles, it should be something that people just glance by and don't even notice. Any other questions, comments, or concerns by the rest of council? Okay, if there's no questions or comments or concerns, I'll be happy to accept a motion on this item.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number R32-2020, adopting and approving the form of a master license agreement for small cell site licenses.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second. Steve?
Yes.
Oh, you're okay. Take that as a yes from Steve. It was a little delayed. Sherry?
Yes.
Thank you. Clint?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. That motion passes. We will move on to item 10.2, discussion and consideration of a resolution authorizing the execution of an interlocal cooperative agreement relating to the conduct of the Community Development Block Grant Program, Emergency Solutions Grant Program, and the Home Investment Partnership Program. Once again, Chase.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. So this is the item I was referring to earlier that you're hearing for the first time, and we're asking you to make a decision on tonight. Just a little bit of background on why we're doing that. The county, who manages the CDBG grant for the city, has informed us that HUD is requiring them to change up some of the language in the interlocal agreement that we are a part of with other municipalities, and whereby we receive the CDBG and other home funds from the county. So HUD has asked them to change that language, and they've given them a very short turnaround in which to do that. And they're at risk of potentially losing their participation in those programs if they get the interlocal re-executed by these municipalities, and that would include us. So they have given us, they've drafted all of the interlocal. I've reviewed it. The changes were very small. Like I said, they dealt mostly with some of the language regarding the specific programs that the county would request funds from. And it doesn't change any of the materiality of the agreement. We're still open to the same amount of funds. The procedures are still very much the same. It was really just small, minor minutia like changes to the language of that agreement. So the form of the agreement's changed a little bit, but the material elements have all stayed the same. I don't know what else to tell you about it, because again, it is very much the same agreement that the city's executed before. It is for a period of 3 years. So a little bit of background on that. We would be in this agreement for another 3 years, participating as a party to the interlocal agreement, receiving funds from these programs through the county. Once that term expires, due to Herriman City's population, we would be able to participate as an entitled entity, whereby we would be able to receive those funds directly from HUD. So we would go through this process on our own, receive those funds directly. There are benefits to that. Sometimes the fund amounts are different. Obviously, we have a little more freedom to choose what we do with those funds. So that would be a benefit that we may see at the end of this agreement. But for the time being, we would need to execute this in order to participate in the county's urban program to receive funds.
Is there a reason that we are unable to do it on our own at this time?
Yeah, so there are some timeframes that HUD requires for all of the entitlements and the letters to be sent. The county, there were some mix-ups with that. The county fumbled some things. There were some deadlines that we missed. And so we do need to participate in order to get those funds from those programs. We do need to participate in those programs through the county.
Just out of curiosity, if we did not participate, could we participate as a separate organization next year and just give up 1 year of funding, or would we have to wait the full 3 years before we could participate?
I couldn't get an answer on that from HUD. My guess is there may be an argument that we could, but we would risk losing CDBG funding for this year and potentially 2 more years. And the funding that we have received in the past is still very generous and has gone a long way that we've received through this program. And so I don't see any risk in us or any harm by us sticking around for another 3 years as part of the Urban County program.
Okay. Thank you for that advice and suggestion. I appreciate it. Any other comments or questions?
You're on mute, I believe, Councilmember Shields.
I know we can't enter councils, but I would really like the idea of, I shouldn't be on mute, I have it off. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Steve. You are very delayed,
Yeah,
so
can you hear me?
just understand that's going to take a second for that to come through.
There we go. Can you hear me now? You can hear me? Okay. I would really like to make something happen on the calendar that says when this item comes back up in 2 years, does the future council seriously consider taking this in to becoming an independent entity?
So, Steve, I think we got your request there, and I would be in agreement that I would look to staff that come the next opportunity that we have that we seriously consider as a city moving forward and doing this on our own, not because we don't think that the county is a good partner, simply because as of our size, I think it's appropriate that we take on some of those responsibilities instead of leaving those to the county at this point. So we will, I would give the same direction to staff that we plan on that in the future, or at least make that recommendation to a future council, as we cannot bind them if we don't happen to be sitting here at that time.
And just for your information, Mayor, we have sent a letter to HUD already informing them of our intention to apply for entitlement status in 2023. Obviously, we'll still have to submit an application in order to receive that entitlement status, but there is a notification requirement, and we've already fulfilled that by letting them know that we do intend to seek that in 2023.
Thank you. That's very proactive of staff, and we appreciate it. Any other comments or questions by council before we take action on this item? If there's no further discussion, I'm happy to accept a motion on this item.
Mayor, I will make a motion to approve resolution number R33-2020, approving and authorizing the execution of an interlocal cooperation agreement relating to the conduct of the Community Development Block Grant Program, Emergency Solutions Grant Program, and the Home Investment Partnership Program.
A second.
I have a second from Sherry and a motion from Clint. We're going to go ahead and start the roll call with Steve.
I second that.
And I understand that it will take just a moment for that to come through. So Steve.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Clint.
Yes.
Sherry.
Yes.
Jared.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. That motion passes. That brings us to the end of our general meeting agenda. Our next Planning Commission meeting will be on the 17th of September. Our next City Council meeting will be the 23rd for our work meeting, starting at 5:30 p.m. and at 7 p.m. for our general meeting. We have previously announced that we were planning on having a City Council work meeting next Wednesday, but the council has decided to cancel that meeting and allow those items to take place on a different night. We do also have some events coming up. We have online family bingo at 4 p.m. on September 10th, which is tomorrow. September 15th, we do have a volunteer cleanup project at Butterfield Park at 2 p.m. On the 17th, we have a volunteer cleanup project at the Danzy House at 9 a.m. And on the 19th, we have a princess party with Miss Herriman on Main Street at 10 a.m. That sounds like a wonderful time. With that, we will... Oh, yeah, Steve's going to be there. Is he going to dress up as a princess? Because I think that's going to be fantastic.
I'm going.
Okay, you're going. Fantastic. With that, we will be moving to a closed session. Just so that the public is aware, we will be suspending our broadcast of the meeting at that point. As we have no further items, even though we will need to come back into our meeting to adjourn, we will not be further broadcasting anything for tonight. With that, I will accept a motion to move to our closed session.
I'll make a motion to temporarily recess the city council meeting to convene in closed session for the purpose to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property as provided by Utah Code annotated 52-4-205.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second. Jared.
Yes.
Sherry.
Yes.
Clint.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
And I will vote yes. That motion passes. Thank you for your participation at this time. Council, we will begin our closed session after a 5-minute break at 8:35.